Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Had a Harem with Ino and Yakumo. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Always wasting no time. Let's start the story.
He had to choose between trying to win over people who would prefer to see him dead in a ditch or saying screw it all after about 8 years of the constant crap. Sometimes literal crap. That was thrown at him. He found himself leaning toward the latter choice because he was currently being pursued by the stereotypical mob. There were even pitchforks and torches. Who could this individual be? Well, our protagonist, of course. Is there like an angry mob store where they get a group discount or something? 'Cause this shit is just ridiculous. Meet Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze, the outcast of Konohagakure no Sato, ladies and gentlemen. Most people would wonder why an 8-year-old child would flee at such a young age from a group of enraged villagers out for blood, and the answer is actually very straightforward. Kyuubi. Naruto was much more jaded and mature than any child or adult should be by the time he was 8 years old. However, it becomes your only choice when approximately 89% of people in your own village want your carcass to be displayed on their wall. After being expelled from the orphanage at the age of 4, Naruto lived on the streets and went on these fox hunts almost every month. As a result, he was extremely familiar with every aspect of the village. Naruto knew the best location to lose the mob by using his knowledge of his hometown. He questioned whether the ninjas in the crowd were skilled enough to outskill the villagers. If they were, he would have been apprehended sooner. He had chosen a path and a hiding place that would result in the death of even an experienced chunin as a precaution. He ducked beneath a thrown rock and turned sharply left into an alleyway as he realized the start of his escape route was approaching. He hurried to the far end of the alley and located the tiny opening in the chain-link fence that would let his tiny frame pass through to the opposite side. The young blonde kept running as quickly as his small legs would allow him to and reached his next obstacle. Without leaving anything to chance, he quickly turned left again, threw himself on his chest, and used the momentum he had gained to slip through a small window and into an abandoned warehouse. With that final move, Naruto had scraped himself pretty badly, as indicated by the sting on his chest, but it was much worse than letting them catch him. He quickly searched for the ladder that would take him to the building's roof, found it in a dark corner, and ran frantically to get to it. With his body hurting all over and his lungs burning, he climbed as quickly as he could until he managed to pull himself up onto a sort of catwalk. Following his survival-inspired obstacle course, he ran to the end of the rickety, rusty catwalk, found the loose window pane, opened it, and was once again welcomed back into the moonlit world. After a brief run, he was opening and shutting the door of a stairway that led to the building on the other side of the warehouse he had just left. Given that this was the Konoha slums, he was pretty sure that none of the mob members would still be pursuing him at this point, so he jogged down the stairs while remaining as silent as possible in case they did. After all, it appeared that Murphy's Law controlled everything he did. Naruto could only fall to the chilly concrete floor as he finally reached the bottom of the staircase and, thus, the end of his life. Or Death Olympic Sprint. The only sounds that could be heard while he was lying on his back were Naruto's own labored breathing and the scurrying of the rats. Most people would be exhausted after running for their lives for almost 30 minutes, even with Kyuubi's addition to his own Uzumaki. Enhanced stamina. A deep, smooth, and even toned voice echoed from somewhere in the building. "I'd give you a 10 for execution, but your showmanship could use some touch-ups. Considering your age, though, I am still rather impressed." The moment our little blonde protagonist heard the first few words, he instantly became motionless. Even now, Naruto closed his eyes, slowed his breathing, and fervently hoped that Murphy had not deceived him once more. As much as I would enjoy a game of opossum with you, I would much rather have a civil conversation. At last, the disembodied voice took shape, albeit an unwelcoming one. Clad in an all-black cloak that appeared to have seen better days, the voice's owner appeared to literally melt out of the shadows. Even though it looked ripped and tattered, it still had the function of fully enclosing the figure from head to toe. The figure's only distinguishing features were that he was male, damn near 6 feet, and his body appeared to be built to hit quickly and forcefully. Naruto liked to think of himself as an optimist of sorts despite his rather dismal and brief life, but even he was aware that there was no way out. He consulted his mental map of the area while the figure was speaking to him, and he realized that any escape route would require him to use energy that he currently lacked. His instincts told him that he wouldn't be able to go very far, even if he could summon some magical force to give him an extra energy boost. This dark, imposing figure was only a few feet away. The sun-kissed blonde sighed and concluded that if the stranger had wanted him dead, he wouldn't have been getting up any time soon. If the stranger was merely wasting his time or prolonging it, he was already dead, so he might as well enjoy it. Naruto made an effort to sit up, but he quickly hissed in agony and reached for his chest to try to stop the excruciating pulsating pain. Abruptly, a warm sensation swept over his body, taking the place of the pain. If it weren't for the loud clattering sound of something metallic at his side, Naruto would have fallen asleep. He turned his head to see what had caused the metallic clang and noticed that the figure had pulled out a handful of thin, jagged pieces of some sort of metal. Looks like when you pulled off that little slide maneuver of yours you weren't exactly paying attention to what was on that floor. Naruto mumbled a little, "Thank you," while he was gasping for air. The figure extended his hands, caught Naruto by the small of his back, and lifted him into a sitting position against the wall. "No problem, kid. Now how about we get to that little chat of ours, hum?" The figure abruptly collapsed onto the floor, sitting with his legs crossed. There was a very awkward silence that followed. Despite his best efforts, Naruto was unable to uncover any additional information about this enigmatic individual. Everything was hidden from view by the damn cloak. The hood of the cloak prevented Naruto from even seeing a face or strand of hair. The odd man started, "So, I'm assuming you have some questions you want to ask me, huh?" The young blonde asked, Well, what did you do to get those metal shards out of me without, well, cutting me open?" "Well, that's a pretty lengthy explanation, so in a nutshell, I healed you," the figure said, clearly laughing at the conclusion. Naruto tried to advance the conversation by posing his next query while fighting the overwhelming urge to either sweat drop or facepalm. Well, why did you help me? I'm not ungrateful or anything, but, well, most people wouldn't do that for me." The figure spoke in a calm and even tone, which was unexpected given the colorful words he had just used. "Well, that answer is pretty simple. I'm not most people. More specifically, I'm not some inbred, ass-backwards, ass-hat villager that can't tell the difference between a jailer and its ward." What now?" Uzumaki said, now completely bewildered. Don't get him wrong, he shared the man's opinions about the villagers, but the entire prisoner ward situation left him speechless. The now somber figure said, "I see, so you don't know. What do you know about the night of October 10th? But that damned cloak was how Naruto knew he didn't know. "My birthday?" inquired the blonde, who was now even more perplexed. The shadowy figure went on, "Yes, your birthday, and also the day of the Kyuubi attack." Naruto said, "Well, the Kyuubi attacked and the Yondaime Hokage fought it and eventually defeated it, saving the village but at the cost of his own life," adding, "Right?" with a suspicious attitude. He sighed and shifted his body so that he was leaning against the wall across from the young child. "Well, that is mostly true, but you are missing some very important parts of the story. To start, yes, the Yondaime fought the Kyuubi and died to defeat it, but he did so by using a kinjutsu that summoned the Shinigami. Now, even the Shinigami couldn't destroy the Kyuubi because it was a huge, massive construct of chakra, or energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. So instead the Yondaime did, well, something retarded. He picked a baby that had been born that night, and that was as far as the stranger got before Naruto interrupted him, and sealed it into the baby. And that baby was me, wasn't it?" The majority believed Naruto to be a naive youngster with very little knowledge. That was true in terms of academics, but the child was a true genius when it came to survival and problem solving in real life. He made the connection in a matter of seconds. The assault, the fox hunts, the looks and stares, his birthday, and, Dan, how hadn't he figured this out sooner? It was simply impossible for there to be so many coincidences without a cause. The stranger gave Naruto a few moments to process this rather important realization before responding with a heavy sigh. "You got it, kiddo. So how you feeling there?" the stranger asked. "Why?" was the quiet response. Leaning against the same wall, the figure sighed again and stood up straight, saying, "Gonna have to be a little bit more specific than that short stuff. Why did he choose me for it? Was it convenience? Did my parents not care? Who were my parents? No more lies." The 8-year-old, who was now crying, concluded. The stranger couldn't hold the child responsible. When the poor bastard found someone he thought he could trust and who truly cared for him, he discovered the old monkey had only been lying to him. He had grown up as an orphan, despised by almost everyone he had ever met. "I didn't really know your parents personally, but I can say this, when your mother found out she was pregnant with you, not a one person could get her to shut up about how she was going to spoil you and treat you like a prince. When your father found out, he ran around the whole village screaming at the top of his lungs that he was going to be a father. Kid, your parents loved you more than anything in this world and would have done anything to make sure you were okay." At the conclusion of his speech, the person wearing a cloak noticed Naruto beaming with happiness and quietly weeping. The blonde, who was still crying and smiling, asked, "What happened to them?" There was clearly a very good reason why his parents weren't there for him, because they loved him so much. That's both complicated and simple. To start, your mother was a gorgeous and deadly redhead kunoichi by the name of Kushina Uzumaki. The most powerful hidden village in the shinobi universe is Konohagakure no Sato. And it had deservedly earned that title after surviving an attack by the strongest of the Biju in all three of the great ninja wars. However, Konoha appeared to be a city just like any other at this time rather than the most powerful ninja village. A blonde teen was racing through the market district, mothers were strolling with their kids, foreign merchants were erecting tents and stalls, shopkeepers were opening for business, and the sounds of someone angrily cursing the evil beings known as paperwork could be heard all over the village. Yes, it's just another Konoha day. Naruto, the blonde teenager, said, "I can never just catch a damn break, huh? It's always gotta be something." Although it appeared that nothing had changed from the outside, a lot had happened in the years after Naruto's encounter with the strange man in the cloak. The majority still saw Naruto as the blonde fool that some people, albeit a much smaller percentage, still desired dead. Naruto had virtually vanished from Konoha shortly after the encounter with the man. He was only occasionally spotted in town for Ichiraku ramen for about 2 years. After that, not even the Anbu could locate him. The Sandaime was certain of this since he had had Anbu follow the blonde in an attempt to learn what he was doing and where he was going. However hard they tried, they were unable to locate the Jinchuriki's hair or hide unless he was sitting on his stool at the ramen stand. Sarutobi soon became concerned. The Kami no Shinobi side of him feared the same thing, but for a completely different reason, while the part of him that saw the little blonde Uzumaki as his grandson feared that something or someone had gotten their hands on him. Ultimately, the goal would be to prevent Konoha's Jinchuriki from ending up in the wrong hands. After 2 years, it appeared that Naruto had returned to Konoha from wherever he had been during that time. During those years, the great majority of those who had detested Naruto also appeared to have either forgotten about it or moved on with their lives. Since Naruto had moved back in, by then, he was viewed as merely another villager. Merely 30% of the villagers still harbored animosity toward him, and fewer than half of them would make an attempt to express it beyond a sneer or a filthy glance. Overall, whether Naruto was present or not, village life had gone on without incident, and the academy was experiencing much of the same. Before his enigmatic disappearance, Naruto was the last student in his class, but now he was an average student. He performed well on written and practical exams, and his attire even reflected this unremarkable new Naruto. The bright orange jumpsuit was gone, replaced by black shinobi sandals, black fingerless gloves with the Uzumaki spiral engraved on the metal plate, a long, sleeved black shirt whose sleeves he rolled up to his forearms, and plain black shinobi pants with various pouches and taped at his ankles. Even though Naruto was still Naruto, 2 things remained constant no matter how he changed: his unhealthy ramen obsession and his love of orange. He wore 2 burnt orange leather strips, the same ones Sasuke wears during the Chunin exam, on each wrist as a tribute to his love of that fruit color. Naruto's placement in the academy was the only setback upon his return. His performance prior to that was not exactly something one would want to present, and he had missed 2 years of classes. The academy's head, who recognized the blonde's potential, determined that it would be best to place him in the class of clan heirs, which is 2 years below his own. Naruto laughed a little when he realized that a class full of clan heirs was ironic. Since he was descended from both Uzumaki and, consequently, Senju, all of the original clans of Konoha were represented in the class. Returning to the present, our blonde protagonist's rambling was caused by the fact that he had stayed up practicing one of the more advanced skills the strange man had given him, and as a result, he had woken up late. He was now sprinting to get to the academy in time for today's exams. He didn't think he wouldn't pass. He had spent those 2 years training to the ground in the deepest, most forgotten forests of Hai no Kuni before he had mysteriously disappeared. He had advanced significantly as a result of the cloaked man, who he later discovered was Vincent, giving him multiple large scrolls that each covered a different branch of shinobi arts and making extensive use of kage bunshin. Gosh, that technique was so OP. With the exception of Iryo Jutsu, the healing arts, and Genjutsu, where he was at mid-genin level, he had left that forest with the strength of an experienced chunin in every branch of the shinobi arts. Can you blame him, though? He had 1,000-year-old, enormous chakra construct in his stomach. Its species were known to be masters of illusions, and they could heal nearly any wound, aside from those that were life-threatening, in a matter of seconds to minutes. Even those that were life-threatening could be healed with a day or 2 of rest. And from a 10-year-old, with different factions breathing down his neck, his training may have slowed compared to his time in the forest when he moved back to the village, but he continued to follow a fairly strict training schedule. He was fairly certain at this point that he was proficient in practically every branch of the ninja arts, at least at the mid-Junin level. But because of his Uzumaki ancestry, he was very nearly a master of Fuinjutsu. Not even close to his mother's near-sage level of mastery, but somewhere close to his father's level. His remarkable growth in the area was a result of his own blood, his parents' journals and notes, and the notes he had freed from Sarutobi. Because of his track record and the fact that, in the shinobi world, experience won battles rather than knowledge, anyone who knew Naruto's true skill level would call it bullshit. Their own Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was the best illustration of this. Throughout his life, the man had witnessed more than he was willing to acknowledge. In general, the man was a strong shinobi thanks to his collection of jutsu, but it was his expertise and experience that enabled him to use them to their fullest potential. He survived the 3 great ninja wars, won countless battles, and was given the title Kami no Shinobi. Naruto would just scoff at those naysayers, without realizing that he had not put in as much training or learned as much as he did. His parents had both emphasized too much the perils of conceit in their society. The statement, "An arrogant shinobi is a dead shinobi even if they don't know it yet," was made by his father in one of his journals. People were unaware that Naruto had actually accumulated some combat experience over the previous 4 years. He would go out when he needed money, sometimes wearing a cloak like the man who had saved his life, and look for bounties while holding his bingo book. In the first few months, he only pursued the smaller D-rank bounties, but during the past year, he has started hunting some very strong C-rank missing nin. Not to mention the numerous strange animals he had started to come across on occasion when he went to the older areas of Hai no Kuni. They all varied in size and various shades of black or dark green, but it was easy to see how they were all of the same species. The creatures all had tight gaunt skin stretched across their frames showing their bones in some sections, an elongated skull with sickly yellow eyes, a mouth full of teeth as sharp as any kunai, and they were nearly all covered in spikes that looked like broken bones that could be used as either a blunt weapon or a sawing blade depending on the individual creature. He did not know what the hell they were, but they were strong, fought in packs of 5 or 8, and were a pain to kill with their spiked hide. Back to the present once more, we see Naruto jump onto a tree branch next to the academy and leaping through a window land in his customary seat with arms folded and feet kicked up on the desk. "You can never just do anything halfway, can you?" came the giggling voice of one of Naruto's best friends, Yakumo Kurama. He had found the girl crying to herself when he was coming back from one of his many bounty hunts. Naruto could not stand the sight of a crying girl and so had gone to try and comfort her. He may have succeeded if not for the Ito demon that occupied her mind, taking advantage of its container's broken state and attempting to use Naruto to escape. The Ito had made a very big mistake trying this. The demon may have been powerful in its own right, but it was nowhere even close to the level of power that Naruto's own demon wielded. Suffice to say that Kyuubi did not like to share, especially when it came to its Jinchuriki. When the Ito had tried to take over the blonde's mind via Genjutsu, it found itself face to face with a pissed Kitsune. A quarter of the illusion demon's Genjutsu power was then absorbed by Kyuubi and transferred to its container. Since it was not a power of the Bijus, the seal would not try and stop the chakra from spreading, allowing Naruto more power in the area of illusions. The remaining demon's filth was then contained in a seal that resembled Naruto's own. When Yakumo returned to the real world, she realized that the preteen in front of her had assisted in purging her of the evil and had repeatedly cried and muttered, "Thank you," into his cloak as she lunged at him. Naruto simply held her and gave her a pat on the back. After she had calmed down, he had described the seal he now possessed and how it would funnel the Ito's power back into her at a steady pace, enabling her to develop the power. After suffering at the hands of the notorious puppy dog No Jutsu, he had agreed to assist her with her training. When he questioned her a year later about why she believed he could help her when not even a Junin could, she merely shrugged and replied, "Because something was telling me that you could." Yakumo was one of only 3 people who knew the true Naruto and his story, and the two had become practically inseparable after a year of training. She had asked the Hokage to let her join the blonde and other clan heirs in the academy because she was confident in her own abilities. Following a brief demonstration of her abilities, he had quickly signed the document allowing her to join the academy. To his left, a giggling voice called Ino Yamanaka asked, "Well, it is Naruto, so is it really a surprise?" She inquired as to how the two were doing in the final year of their academy careers after observing how well they had been doing. All they'd said to her was that they trained. She had then demanded that they assist her as well, not entirely believing them. She was able to see the truth of their statements after a brief argument and a month of Naruto's kick your ass into shape bootcamp, patent pending. She matured along with her development as a nin.to.be. She set out to make amends after realizing the damage her diet was causing to her body and how she had damaged her relationships with other people for a boy. Her parents were overjoyed to see their young daughter making an effort, and following a heartfelt embrace, they were once again a happy family. Sakura was too much of a fangirl and believed Ino was merely trying to outdo her, so she had tried to patch things up with her. She had reconnected with her childhood friends Shikamaru and Choji after realizing that it had been a pointless endeavor. However, it soon became clear how close Ino had become to Naruto, and she was frequently spotted with him in the village, along with Yakumo. After noticing each other's feelings for the young blonde, the two preteens began a sort of rivalry to determine who would get the Kyuubi container first. However, they maintained their respect for the other and kept it as minor and unimportant as possible. The older generation frequently made jokes about how the rivalry between the two was very similar to that between a hip, silver-haired Junin and his youthful counterpart. The blonde, who was now crying, asked, "Why must the two of you be so mean to me?" "Oh, hush up, you big baby." Yamanaka, who was always in charge, said. She began, only to stare in disbelief and mild rage as she saw her crush's black-clad figure sobbing into the arms of her brunette rival, who was consoling the blonde by petting his hair and muttering that the mean blonde not hurting him while she was around. She yelled at the two. "Oi! The hell," Yakumo said, acting as mature as she could. "See Ino, this is why he likes me more." Okay, so she was sticking her tongue out at Ino, but that's not the point, is it? "He does not. Watch, I'll show you, you damn brunette," the blonde exclaimed, turning from envious and furious to kind and naive as she grabbed a bowl of ramen from somewhere. She practically sang, "Oh Naruto, look what I got for our special day today." The once crying blonde was now leaning into his fellow blonde's embrace and contentedly munching on the bowl of ambrosia. At least to him. When she realized her plan was working, she blew a raspberry at the brunette, who was muttering, "How could I forget the damn ramen?" while banging her head against the desk. Iruka Amino, the Chunin instructor for the class, echoed, "All right, shut the hell up you brats and get ready. Get ready. The Genin exams begin, now." The Sandame and several Junin teachers are seen peering into his crystal ball and watching the same tests in the Hokage Tower across the village. "You heard the man. It begins. Let's see how this year's hopefuls do, nay?" the Cage said, blowing on his pipe of whatever the hell was in there. As he and his assistant Mizuki distributed the test papers, Iruka gave a lecture, saying, "The first part of the exams will be a written, testing your knowledge of our history and some battlefield situations you may find yourself in. You will have 1 hour to finish this exam and no more. If you are caught cheating, you will be penalized 3 points off your test. If you are caught twice, you will fail this portion of the exam," Mizuki continued. Iruka gave the all clear to start, and the students left as soon as all of the papers had been distributed. Some of the students from civilian families had already been marked as failed. Naturally, Iruka and Mizuki observed much more than just those students engaging in cheating, but they chose to ignore them because their strategies satisfied the test's cheating standards. They were concerned about Naruto and his small group, or at least Iruka was. Yakumo was just staring out the window, Ino was just using a kunai to file her nails, and Naruto appeared to have fallen asleep, much like a certain Nara nearby. Sakura had filled it out on her own prowess, if you can call it that. Shimaru, well, no one knew what the hell he had been doing behind that collar and dark glasses. Hinata had used her Byakugan to help her, and Kiba had been caught once using Akamaru. Shikamaru had also been caught trying to help Choji, and one of the fangirls had been caught trying to help Sasuke, even though he didn't really need it. The teachers collected the tests after the allotted time had passed, and Iruka completed some quick grading while Mizuki led the class outside for the remaining exam sections. As soon as they were outside, every student stretched or made some other gesture of relief to express how happy they were to be leaving the stuffy classroom. Mizuki stood aside with a clipboard prepared to record the marks after saying, "All right, now we'll be moving on to the field exams. First up we got accuracy tests. You will be given 10 kunai and then 10 shuriken. The goal is to aim for the center of the dummy. We will be going in alphabetical order, so Shino is up first." In the manner of a true Aburame, Shino simply threw the kunai in pairs with the least amount of effort. He received a score of 17/20 for doing the same with the shuriken. The students advanced one by one, with the clan air group receiving at least 15/20 and Sasuke receiving a 19/20, despite Yakumo and Ino receiving identical scores, shocking the entire class. When Naruto's turn finally came, he decided to flaunt himself by catching all 10 kunai between his fingers and tossing them carelessly. Not even a millisecond later, he fired the shuriken after grabbing them in a display of quickness and agility. The blonde's mess up caused the majority of the class to laugh, and none of the weapons failed to hit the intended target. The other clan heirs just stood to the side, shaking their heads, while Hinata was shyly thinking some strange, obsessive shit about Naruto that is not appropriate to discuss in front of children. Yakumo and Ino had to restrain themselves from kicking all their asses for being idiots. The smirking Chunin could only say, "Naruto UFAI," before his fellow instructor's voice cut him off. Actually, Naruto may not have hit the designated target, but he has demonstrated something even better. Each of his weapons has hit either a vital organ, an area that would leave the enemy near death, or a one-hit kill spot. So I think he deserves full marks on this one. Don't you, Mizuki? Said the Chunin with scars. The scarred Chunin gritted his teeth in rage and said, "You're right, Iruka." A certain Cyclopean Junin said, "Kid's good, I'll give him that." You are correct, my eternal rival. The young Uzumaki's flames of youth burn brie. Damn it, guy. Shut the hell up. Now is not the time for your fucking flames of youth. Such unyoutful words coming from a lady, Anko, a woman such as yourself should not utter such. For Kami. Sama's sake, if you don't shut the hell up, guy, I will personally make you more aerodynamic by removing what makes you a man. Let's return to those genin exams, shall we? There's no way the idiot scored better than my Sasuke-kun. Guess whom? Many students had developed a new fear of crossing Ino after the Yamanaka heir said, "Sakura, I swear if you utter one more word I will show you why spies fear getting a visit from someone like my daddy." And let me tell you this, we Yamanaka give a new meaning to the term, mind. Fucking, got it? Moving on then, said the pineapple-haired Chunin, a little scared. He had heard a lot about the renowned Yamanaka interrogators during his brief time as an Anbu, and it's safe to say that even Ibiki was afraid of them and their Kekai Genkai. We will now be moving on to the Taijutsu section of the exams. You will either be paired with me or Mizuki based on a random drawing. You will have to last anywhere between 1 to 2.5 minutes in the ring to pass. No weapons or jutsu of any kind are allowed, though you may use chakra to enhance your body. If you step out of bounds or are soundly defeated by either of us before the time limit, then you will fail this section. Keep in mind you must pass at least 3 of the 4 exams in order to receive a headband from this academy. Line up in any order, and when it is your turn, draw a name from the hat. The line shrank in pairs until the Uchiha and Uzumaki heirs were the only ones left. Putting his hand in the hat, Naruto pulled out the first piece of paper he felt after deciding to go first. With a smile, he unfolded the paper and read aloud, "I got you, Iruka. Sensei. Guess that means you get Mizuki then, Sasuke." The emo just h'd in response. Yes, Sasuke had his own verb. Naruto and Iruka entered the ring, bowed to one another, and then assumed the academy stance. The smiling Chunin said, "Don't be so easy on me now, Naruto, do you understand?" The blonde Genin.be joked, "Well, I don't know you were getting on in years there, sensei." Naruto, I am so kicking your ass for that comment now. What's that, old ma? Hajime. Iruka then charged at Naruto at a speed comparable to that of Genin. Choosing to begin simply, Iruka punched the blonde in the face to start his attack. Naturally, Naruto saw this coming and made the decision to show his pseudo-brother some of the things he could really do. Naruto was standing on Iruka's outstretched hand after a quick hop. Naruto kicked Iruka in the side of the head while striking at nearly Junin speed. He may have given up Anbu years ago, but that didn't mean his abilities had diminished too much. Iruka grabbed Naruto by the ankle and used momentum to try to slam the black-clad academy student into the ground. Even though the Jinchuriki was taken aback by this turn of events, he quickly collected himself. Upon realizing what was happening, he extended both arms and sent a small amount of chakra through his limbs, which allowed him to prevent his body from colliding with the ground without suffering any injuries. Donkey kicked his sensei in the solar plexus with his free leg, knocking the wind out of the tanned Chunin and freeing his other leg as he used the chakra that had accumulated in his arms to push back against Iruka. He twisted his body from being on the ground on all fours, taking advantage of his sensei's lack of breath and surprise. In a matter of milliseconds, he was in the air, kicking the instructor in the ribs. Iruka raised his left arm to block the kick meant for his ribs because he didn't want to be struck in the chest twice in a row. He was shocked to discover that the force of his student's kick actually caused the bones in his left limb to rattle. The scarred man used the same hand he had used to block to grab Naruto's outstretched hand and use it to pull the blonde into his range. He sent chakra through his left arm to lessen the pain and made a note to dodge rather than block any more attacks. As Naruto hurried toward him, Iruka turned around with his back to his fictitious younger brother and slammed his right elbow hard into the startled academy student's stomach, causing spittle to fly all over his shoulder. Iruka kept his hand firmly around Naruto's wrist, trying to prevent the blonde from countering. He then attempted to slam the Kyuubi container into the ground again, this time by putting his right arm under his student's armpit. This time Naruto let his legs fall to the ground, first absorbing the shock and once again stopping him from meeting Mother Earth. Letting his body go completely slack on the ground, he used his free hand to grab onto Iruka's arm that was still latched onto his own, and curling into a semi-ball he pulled himself up and his sensei down to introduce the bottom of his sandals to Iruka's face. The last thought Iruka had before he made out with Naruto's sandals was, "Fuck, this is gonna hurt like a bye." As the last 2 rounds of the taijutsu test had started, many of the students assumed that the match between Sasuke and Mizuki would be the one to watch. But with Mizuki trying to suck up to the Uchiha heir by going easy on him and leaving all kinds of openings in his attacks, it was over before Naruto and Iruka had even started theirs. With that, all the students turned to watch their other sensei fight with Naruto. Based on Naruto's standing in the class, the students had assumed it was going to be nothing special, but boy were they surprised when Naruto had, in the blink of an eye, stood on Iruka's arm and lashed out with a kick aimed at their sensei's head. As the match continued, the jaws of everyone there continued to drop lower and lower. Even Yakumo and Ino were surprised at the level of power the two were fighting at. They knew Naruto was strong, but he had never showed them how truly skilled he was. Everyone was even more surprised with how evenly matched the two were. The students of course knew that their instructor was strong in his own right, but with as comical and boring as he seemed most of the time, they would have never imagined that Iruka could fight at such a level. In the Hokage Tower, the group of Junin and even the Hokage himself were shocked at the level of skill being displayed by an academy student and a Chunin instructor. Some among the group knew that Iruka had been in Anbu at one time, but thought that after years of teaching at the academy that his skills would have dulled considerably, but here he was grappling and fighting at a mid-Junin level. Even more surprising was the fact that one Naruto Uzumaki was the one responsible for pushing Iruka to fight at that level. Now what the academy students didn't realize was that this was even more shocking, because this was pure taijutsu being used. Many of the Junin and even the Hokage himself suspected that had this been a anything goes kind of match, there would have been a great deal of collateral damage as well as many more surprises. This also confirmed for Sarutobi that Naruto had been hiding a great deal of his true strength, among other things. Normally this wouldn't bother him, but considering this was both someone he considered his grandson and the village's Jinchuriki, he couldn't very well let it slide without knowing the true extent of the young teen's power. It also didn't help that Naruto had stopped referring to him as Gigi and their bond had become strained when the young blonde had fucked. He knew something had happened when Naruto had vanished. Looks like he would need to have a talk with the blonde Uzumaki soon. As Naruto was helping Iruka walk back to where the rest of the class was, his instincts screamed that something was going to happen soon. Taking note of it, he broadened the area that his senses normally encompassed to a slightly larger area. He also made sure to activate his empath sense as well to be even safer. Naruto had always been able to get a feel for what intentions people had for him ever since he could walk, but it wasn't until he met Vincent that he understood why. It seemed that being an empath was somewhat of an Uzumaki trait, and it had appeared in several of the Uzumaki clan's greatest clan heads to some degree. He guessed that he must have inherited it from his mother, and thanks to having the mightiest of the tailed beasts stuck in his gut, the sense had been amplified to even greater heights. He wondered if it would be passed down to any children he had, like a Kekai Genkai. For the moment he just put that thought into the "ask Kyuubi later" pile. Alright class, onto the last portion of the exam. You will be asked to perform the basic 3 academy jutsu: Kawarimi, Henge, and Bunshin. If you have anything else you feel would showcase another skill you have, this would be the time to do so. Anything you show will be counted as extra credit, announced Iruka. Majority of the civilian students fared decently enough on at least 2 out of the 3 jutsu, and a handful of them even had some other jutsu or skill they had learned elsewhere, earning them their headbands. The clan heirs all did perfect on the basic 3, and all of them had a clan jutsu to show off what their clan was known for. Deciding to return to his average performance again, Naruto performed the 3 jutsu as asked, and as extra credit performed a minor wind jutsu that would put out campfires or cover tracks, which disappointed Iruka, Yakumo, and Ino, as they had wanted to see what else Naruto could do. Wrapping his arms around the shoulders of his 2 best friends and with his patented foxy grin on, Naruto said, "So girls, we've passed our genin exam and are free the rest of today. What say we go celebrate?" "Sorry Ruto, but daddy and my mom wanted to have a family dinner to celebrate tonight," sighed the slightly saddened Ino. She loved her family dearly, but she was still very tempted to go with her crush. "Yay, my aunt and uncle wanted to do the same. Sorry Naru.kun, but I promise we'll do something together tomorrow, okay?" Yakumo said, trying to cheer up the blonde. Though his foxy grin was now gone, he still smiled to cover up his sadness in front of the girls. Yay, of course. Don't even worry about it. You two go home and have fun, alright? With a hug and a kiss on the cheek from both girls, Naruto found himself alone. He had come to accept his life as an orphan long ago, and thanks to his somewhat sensei Vincent, he had gained closure with the matter. That still didn't make it any less depressing on days like these. As he mused on what it would have been like had the events the night of his birth not happened, he found himself in one of the taller trees surrounding the village walls. As he was gazing at the moon, his senses flared, and his empath sense, he really should come up with a name for it, warned him that there was someone feeling very anxious and devious close by. Turning around and sending chakra into his eyes to allow him to see further, he spotted a man he didn't really like and who didn't really like him carrying something he shouldn't. Deciding to take out some of his more negative feelings on the bastard, he jumped down onto a lower branch and waited. Kami-sama, this guy was slow. Right as Naruto's patience was about to run out, Mizuki burst out of the foliage with a crazed grin on his face. Naruto's sweat dropped at the fact that Mizuki hadn't even noticed him yet. God, how the hell did this guy even become a Chunin? Shrugging and deciding to take advantage of the situation at hand, Naruto waited for the right moment before he leapt up and axe-kicked Mizuki, sending him plummeting to the forest floor. Naruto waited for a bit before he heard the satisfying sound of the traitor's body hitting the floor and the subsequent scream of pain accompanying it. Chuckling to himself, he calmly leapt down to the forest floor to find Mizuki struggling to get out of the crater he found himself in. Whistling, Naruto began, "I guess I put more power into that than I thought. Oops, haha. What the hell? What the fuck are you doing here, demon?" came the pained voice of Mizuki. "Ouch, Mizuki, you wound me," Naruto said with a fake hurt look. "And I was actually just out enjoying the lovely night air when I happened upon you with what looks like the village's scroll of sealing. Now I may have just gotten my Hitai.8, but I'm pretty sure that Chunins don't have that kind of clearance." Finally getting into a standing position, even though he was shaking and hurting all over, he grunted out, "Fuck you, demon brat. I won't even be marked as a missing nin if I kill you here and now." Sweat dropping once more, Naruto began, "Okay, seriously, how stupid are you? First off, the majority of the villagers don't even give a shit about what I do anymore, and look at where you were and what happened all of like a minute ago." Scoffing, Mizuki defended, "That was just because you caught me off guard. There's no way you could actual L." Was as far as Mizuki got before he was interrupted by Naruto's foot meeting his face. The Chunin turned traitor was then reminded that Hai no Kuni's trees were some of the thickest and hardest in the whole elemental countries. And it didn't look like he was getting up anytime soon. Are you fucking serious? Face palming, Naruto sighed and gathered the traitor on one shoulder and the scroll of sealing on the other. He had no need for it because most of the jutsu didn't suit his style, and any that did were already in either the scrolls Vincent gave him or in the ones his parents had left to him. Guess it's time for that talk with Sarutobi. Probably what all my senses were warning me about. Sarutobi was a very patient man, and if all you did for most of your day was sit behind a desk and do paperwork, you'd be patient too, or insane. Probably both. But his young pseudo-grandson was testing this patience. He knew that Naruto knew that he wanted to see him for very important business, and Hiruzen knew damn well that Naruto was far from slow if that short fight with Mizuki was anything to go by, so why the blonde teen still wasn't in his office after 10 minutes was trying his patience. Finally, a highly frustrated Hiruzen got up and announced, "Okay, that's it, I am tired of waiting." Waiting for who, ya old monkey? Only 4 individuals had ever dared to call him that, and since 2 of them were deceased and one was traveling the world to keep up a spy network, there was only one person to whom that voice could have belonged. He turned around and saw the teen he had been waiting for eating a bowl of ramen while lounging in a chair in the office's corner. Then he noticed the scroll of sealing strewn carelessly on the sofa next to the silver-haired traitor's unconscious body. A stressed out Hokage moaned, I'm getting way too old for this shit. I'll say. I've been here for the past like 3 minutes waiting on you to notice me," the Jinchuriki added. "I'm not even going to try and dignify that with a response. Now first off, Anbu." 3 shadows materialized in front of the Hokage, standing as straight as they could. With a little, "Hi." The 3 Anbu, the scroll, and Mizuki disappeared from the room. "I want 2 of you to take Mizuki to the T&I department and find out exactly who he was working for, and I want the last one of you to take the scroll of sealing back to its proper place in my library." He turned to face the now somber blonde and said, "Now Naruto, we need to have a talk. First, I would like to congratulate you on completing your first A-rank mission. Your mission pay will be deposited into your account before the night is out. However, we have more pressing matters to attend to." Sarutobi sagged in his chair noticeably and adopted an expression that revealed the man's advanced age. "What happened to you? First you disappear for 2 years, and when you come back you're hiding things from me. You stop calling me G." With an uncharacteristically solemn tone and stern expression, Naruto interrupted. Let me stop you there, Sarutobi. I'm gonna tell you this right now. Where I went and what I did is frankly none of your business. All I will tell you is that I received help from someone, and that same someone revealed to me things that had been kept away from me for far too long. Sarutobi winced visibly at that. I feared that that was the case. I take it you know everything then? Everything from the fox to who my parents were, yes, something you continuously lied to me about on several occasions. And that is the reason I no longer call you Gigi. You lost all the respect I had for you that day. But Naruto, you have to understand why I did it. I understand perfectly, Hiruzen. You were protecting the village from Iwa and Kumo coming for blood, and don't say it was for me. Had I been just any other child you wouldn't have cared. It's because I'm the village's weapon on a leash that you did all this. But what you don't understand is that though you may have saved the village and me from Iwa and Kumo, but you damned me to a hell designed by the very same village you had sworn to protect. Naruto, they were just idiots that knew too much because someone thought it was a good idea to blab who the container of the demon was. The same demon who not hours before had nearly decimated the whole village. But your father wanted for me to be seen as a hero, yes, but that's not what he had in mind. Why do you think nobody knew that my mother was the container? Why no one knew that Mito Uzumaki was the container? They were powerful kunoichi married to equally powerful shinobi, Kages no less. And even they feared what would happen if the secret were to get out. By now, Sarutobi's age and the sins he had committed were clearly visible on his face. The fact that he was no longer the Hokage at this point and was merely an elderly man who had made far too many mistakes in his lengthy life was even more tragic. Please, I'm sorry, Naruto, the broken man sobbed, tears streaming down his cheeks. I had your best intentions in mind. I never meant for any of this to happen. At one time I loved you like a grandfather. You were one of the few people I would have given my life for. I respected you. At one time you were truly the Kami no Shinobi, a respected and feared man. Now all I see is an old man who is too afraid to rock the boat for fear of another war breaking out. Maybe you should listen to yourself for once, laughed Naruto. As Naruto finished venting all he had been holding inside for years to the old Hokage, he walked to the window and opened it. You're always preaching about Konoha and the will of fire, and you're right. There's a reason we came out of all three of the Shinobi World Wars not just alive, but as the strongest of the hidden villages. Why we were able to survive an attack from the strongest of all the Biju and come back from it. This village stands as the strongest for a damn good reason. After saying, and you're right, you did have my best intentions at heart, but remember, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Goodbye, Gigi. Naruto then jumped out into the village, abandoning the shattered man. Something inside the man had broken as Naruto finished speaking. I have lived my life regretting far too many things. I'm no better than Tsunade trying to drown her sorrows in liquor and gambling. It was because of this sorry state I was in that Orochimaru got away and is now one of our biggest threats. Enough is enough. I am the Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. I earned the title of Kami no Shinobi through blood, sweat, and tears. This is my village. They're my ninja, thought the newly regenerated individual. He thought, Naruto, I have made a mess of not just your life but of so many others, and for that I am sorry. He started working with a steely look in his eyes. I may never earn the right to be called your Gigi again, but I promise you that I will do everything in my power to become the man you once respected. And that night, a fire that hadn't been seen in decades started burning again. The Kami no Shinobi had returned. Today was Genin assignment day, a day that some Junin looked forward to and others hated. Even people who weren't going to be Junin. Senseis came to see who Kakashi would be failing this year and how the Genin hopefuls fared. Naturally, the Scarecrow wasn't even present yet, which wasn't shocking at all. When the Hokage finally entered, everyone stopped talking, not out of deference to the Hokage, but rather because they were taken aback by the man's aura. The Sandaime's almost oppressive aura startled many of the younger Junin, while others, like Asuma and Guy, had not experienced this aura since the Third Great Shinobi War, when the man was much younger. Just grinning, Asuma remarked, "Looks like Dad got his fire back. This is gonna be interesting." With a book in hand, Kakashi sunshined into the center of the room just as the Hokage was about to speak. He then idly drawled out, "Sorry for being late, Hokage. Sama, I was." "Enough." Hiruzen yelled, revealing his Hokage status by slightly opening his chakra. "I have heard enough of your excuses, Kakashi. I've let it slide before because you are one of the more powerful shinobi we have in our forces, but no more. You are a ninja of this village and I am your Hokage. When I tell you to be somewhere at a certain time, you will be there 5 minutes early. Do you understand me, Junin?" Kakashi immediately put his book away and straightened his posture. "Hi, it won't happen again, Hokage." "Sama." Kakashi then returned to his fellow Junin, bowing. Despite Sarutobi's age and his strength, he was confident that the Hokage could still throw him around like a pinball if he so desired. Now, like I was about to say, we are here to assign genin teams. As usual, those Junin who either volunteered to become senseis or were persuaded to do so, he said while looking at Kakashi, have already voted on who they would like. So those of you who chose to teach these genin, please step forward. Asuma, Kurenai, Kakashi, Hayate, and Genma approached the Hokage's desk at this point. Many of the Junin senseis were taken aback when the statement was made. I have reviewed the teams you all wanted, and normally I would agree with your choices, but in light of certain events I have chosen to make some changes. They believed they had provided sufficient justification to obtain the people they desired. Asuma, you had wanted to train the next Ino, Shika, Sho team, but I fear that our enemies will have by now made proper countermeasures to combat said team. Instead, you will be getting Team 10 consisting of Shino Aburame, Choji Akamichi, and Sasuke Uchiha. Several of the Junin gasped. They had assumed that because of the Sharingan, Kakashi would have inherited the Uchiha heir. Dad, you sure about this? I mean, I can see your logic, but the Uchiha? I'm hardly capable of teaching a Sharingan user. Besides, what would the council say? Asuma expressed her surprise at this. You are correct. You aren't capable of teaching a Sharingan user. But you won't be teaching a Sharingan user. Young Sasuke has as of yet to even unlock his family's dujutsu, and he will already have more than enough resources to train said dujutsu when that time comes. I am giving him to you so that he can learn to fight without the use of his Sharingan. Hiruzen said quietly. Secondly, what of the council? I am the Hokage, and these are my ninja to command as I see fit, and they have no say in these matters. Asuma returned to the line of Junin after saying, I see. Sorry for doubting you, Pops. Moving forward. Ms. Yuhi, you will be getting Team 8, which will be Hinata Hyuga, Shikamaru Nara, and Kiba Inazaka. Though the young Hyuga is under a probation of sorts. Hokage. Sama. What do you mean by probation? The red-eyed beauty asked, utterly bewildered and concerned about what the Hokage meant by probation. That's quite simple. The heiress is far too shy for this line of work. If she has not made a significant amount of progress in said area as well as skill, then she is to be removed from the program and recommended to join the Med Corps instead. Kurenai simply nodded and took her place in line again, too shocked and scared to speak. Now Kakashi. You will be receiving the team of Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze, he said, causing many Junin to gasp in shock. The child was their Yondaime's son. The same Junin face palmed after pondering how similar the two appeared for just 4 seconds. The child was an exact replica of Minato. Why hadn't anyone noticed? The fact that Naruto was the son of his sensei did not surprise Kakashi. He had been aware of that for years and had made every effort to adopt the child, but the council had always blocked his plans. He could only steal gifts for the child and shield him from gangs when he could. The fact that Sarutobi was at last disclosing that information startled Kakashi. Since he was now a genin, he reasoned that there was no reason to keep it a secret because the child probably already knew about it. Hiruzen went on, as well as Ino Yamanaka and Yakumo Kurama. You will be Team 7. He was waiting for the unexpected outbursts to stop. Teams made up of people from civilian backgrounds who had also passed the genin exams were assigned to Hayate and Genma. The majority of the Junin departed as team announcements came to an end in order to either do Junin things or create a rough lesson plan and test for their genin. But Kakashi stayed behind after the Hokage gave him a quick look. You wanted to speak to me, Hokage? Sama? The silver-haired Junin asked it. Hiruzen said, yes, I did. Because of certain events, I've learned that Naruto is much stronger than what he would have us believe. He leaned back in his chair and drew on his pipe. Sir, if I may. He did beat Iruka in an all-out taijutsu match. Also, he is their child. It's not really that much of a surprise if he's stronger than most, is it? Asked the confused Junin. Normally yes, but there are reasons I am telling this to you. First off, as I said earlier, you are one of if not the strongest Junin that this village has to offer. In a few more years I have no doubt you could claim this hat if you so chose. I am not saying this to praise you but to justify why I gave you the team I did. Hiruzen took a breather and relaxed into his chair more. Yakumo a few years ago was completely incapable of most any kind of physical activity. Kurenai had tried to help her much like Guy helped his young protege, but where Guy succeeded Kurenai failed. The girl had then become consumed by her darker emotions, and with as potent as her bloodline was her mind created a defense to stop her power from tearing her apart. Sadly, the defense it chose took the form of a demon named the Ito. The Ito would have consumed her and went on a rampage using her powers to try and destroy our village had she not met a certain blonde. Sarutobi took a pause here. Kakashi saw the look of sadness flash across the man's eyes as he mentioned the blonde teen but chose not to say anything out of respect for the man and his personal life. I don't know what Naruto did, but only a year later she had gained near full mastery of her Kekkei Genkai, and her physical prowess, while not too impressive, was bordering on genin level. Considering the girl was not too far off from being handicapped by her condition a mere year before makes it all that more astonishing. The Scarecrow was of course surprised by this. He had after all seen the girl perform, and she was at least at Chunin level with her taijutsu, as well as with her weapons proficiency. He could only imagine how strong she was when she went all out. Ino Yamanaka was at one time a Sasuke fangirl and was one of the more fervent of the bunch as well. In the last year of the academy she made friends with Naruto, and just like Yakumo there was a massive jump in power. The only thing that was keeping her even slightly better than her once friend Sakura was her clan jutsu, but by the last month of the academy the girl was in the running for Rookie of the Year. Sir, I understand that you've given me quite the powerful bunch of genin, but why are you telling me this? Sighing, Sarutobi continued, we had no idea, scratch that we still don't know exactly how powerful Naruto truly is, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was closing in on your level of power. The fact that he's known about the Kyuubi and his heritage since he was 8 has allowed him a massive amount of time to train. He has played an active role in training those two girls. If he was smart enough to mask his true power so he could slip under our radar, I have no doubts he convinced those two to do the same as well. What I am saying, Kakashi, is do not take these three lightly. They may well be at Junin level already, and Naruto could be even past that if he has learned to harness the power of his ward. Then why did you give them to me, Hokage? Sama. I fail to see why they aren't Chunin already, or at least Tokubetsu Genin. Questioned the still confused Scarecrow. If they had managed to attain that level of power on their own, what the hell would they need him for? It's actually a mutual relationship. I'm hoping that they'll rub off on you and give you a reason to get even stronger than you are, and I hope that you will guide them on the path they have chosen to walk. They may be powerful, but they are still just young children about to be thrown into a world of liars, thieves, rapists, and murderers wearing the guise of heroes. You know this just as well as I, Kakashi. They will need someone to guide them through those trying times we all go through. I understand, Hokage. Sama, if I may be excused now, Kakashi said as he bowed. Yes, you may go. Wow, Mizuki really went down like that? Spoke a sweat-dropping Ino. Yay, I know the guys was pretty weak compared to us, but geez. Spoke an equally sweat-dropping Yakumo. Wrapping her arms around Naruto's left arm, Yakumo continued. But this is Naru-kun we are talking about, and he is my amazingly strong guy after all. Yakumo said as she laid the sweet innocent girl act on as hard as one possibly could. Whoa, wait a minute, you're amazingly strong guy, he's my strong guy. Once again, doing one of her famous 180s in personality, she stuck Naruto's right arm in the middle of her blossoming cleavage and batting her eyelashes she continued, isn't that right, Ruto-kun? She may be just 12, but damn was she already growing in the right places. It also didn't help that as ninja with higher amounts of chakra they naturally matured much faster than average people. And boy was Ino using that to her advantage. Yakumo was as usual left pouting as she lacked in the curves department. That's not to say she wasn't an attractive girl in her own right though. Where Ino was sultry and sexy, Yakumo was classy and refined, though she wasn't being very refined at the moment as she was currently tugging her crush towards herself while childishly sticking her tongue out at the rival for her crush's affection. Naruto was, as usual, left sweat-dropping and at a loss for words. He dearly cared for both of the girls but could never find the words to tell them that. He was rather stunted in the affection department after all. Wait a minute. At this, Ino let go of Naruto's arm she had been tugging at, causing the blonde to tumble into Yakumo, landing them in a very compromising position. Yakumo wasn't a pervert, but she wasn't a prude either. She had a small collection of icha-icha under her bed, but that is irrelevant, cough. But it was understandable why the poor girl was blushing so much when she found herself beneath her crush's body, just centimeters away from touching lips. Before she could seize the opportunity, a very domineering Yamanaka yanked Naruto to his feet. She got up and got herself together, making sure to get Ino back later. You got some questions to answer, Mr. Yamanaka insisted. Naruto shook and said, I do? He was well aware of the strength a furious woman could possess, and even he lacked the strength to defeat her. He may have been brave, but he was not a fool. Yay. How come you didn't tell us you were that strong? Yakumo responded, yay. Naruto asked, what do you mean? Well, we knew you were pretty powerful, but we never assumed you were that powerful. I mean, the way you and Iruka were trading blows the other day looked like two seasoned Junin going at it. Yakumo graciously nodded in agreement. Naruto exclaimed, laughing and nervously scratching the back of his head, oh yay, that he thought you two would forget about that thing. Yakumo sulked, Naru.kun, that's mean. As she stepped into his personal space, Ino asked, "Are you trying to keep secrets from us?" No, it's just, well, I never really had a reason to reveal my strength. But I guess with us being shinobi now we're going to find ourselves in some tricky positions, so I guess I should share, huh? The blonde Kyuubi container said, frantically waving his hands in an attempt to defend himself. "Gee, you think?" sneered the always domineering Ino. Alright, well. The genin returned to their classroom for their final team assignments after enjoying a nice weekend of either unwinding or starting more rigorous training. Iruka entered the room grinning broadly and holding a clipboard. He had witnessed these children grow from snotty brats to snotty brats capable of killing someone with their bare hands and willfully disobeying all natural laws. The pleasures of teaching, ah. He cleared his throat in an effort to divert the class's attention. He was ready to employ his notorious demon head jutsu, but to his surprise, they actually stopped talking when he asked. He was aware that they had come to terms with the type of life they were about to embark on and that they would need to be at their best, or they simply wanted him to finish it quickly. Yes, it was most likely the last one. Well, he had fulfilled his responsibility. Their Junin. Senseis were responsible for bringing them back to reality. Alright class, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. I have seen you all grow up into some talented nin.to.be, and I can say with the utmost confidence that all of you here have the potential to do great things. Who knows, maybe one of you is the next Hokage, or maybe your team will be the next Sannin. But know this, no matter what, watch out for each other. In this world of ours, friends and comrades may be the only thing between you and death. Cherish the bonds you make. You are now ninja of the leaf, so wear your Hitai.8 with pride. You are the next carriers of the will of fire. My generation has had our time. The future of Konohagakure no Sato is in your hands now. Do us proud. Iruka announced with the utmost amount of pride in his tone. All of the genin exchanged glances and nodded while grinning broadly. They had succeeded. All the years spent in the academy had paid off. It was the day. Iruka proceeded down the list until he eventually arrived at the clan air groupings. With that out of the way, I'll begin announcing teams. First up with Hayate Gecko as sensei, we have Team 1 with. He may have meant it when he said that each of them held the key to the future, but he meant it most to these children. They would have a direct say in the laws and policies of this very village, since they were supposed to be the future leaders of Konoha's founding clans. Team 7 will consist of Yakumo Kurama, Yakumo said, smiling and crossing her fingers in the hopes that her best friend and crush would be on her squad. Ino Yamanaka, the two girls waved with smiles. Despite their rivalry for Naruto's affection, they did not despise one another. Yakumo had never had any true friends and had led a sheltered life. Naturally, she eventually befriended Naruto, but she had a crush on him. It was different when she met Ino. She could discuss girly topics with her that she found difficult to discuss with Naruto. Ino was essentially the same. Yakumo was Sakura's first real best friend because she had never been a good girlfriend in the first place. And the final member of your team will be, Iruka paused intentionally. He had to milk this moment for all it was worth. Both the girls latched onto Naruto like he would disappear at any moment. Naruto Uzu was as far as he got before the two girls screamed in happiness that they had gotten their crush and pseudo-sensei on their team. They may be kunoichi now, but they were still preteen girls with a crush after all. Naruto merely sat there with his foxy grin on. He had worried that they wouldn't be placed on the same time, but maybe this was the Sandaime trying to apologize to him. He knew that that was probably the case, but he also knew that the man may also have ulterior motives. Alright you two. Let me finish, yay? Now, as I was saying, your final team member will be Naruto Uzuma. I'm so fucking stupid. The genin were surprised as Iruka was never one to curse without good reason, and he was now also pounding his head on the desk. What the hell was he doing? Naruto narrowed his eyes at this. Unless our sensei is the Hokage himself, there is no way that Iruka would have reacted like that. There has to be something to this, but what was? Oh shit, the old man did he? Taking a break from making a spectacle of himself, he gave Naruto a pointed look and asked, "Did you know about this, Naruto?" "Know about what, Iruka?" "Sensei," asked a very suspicious blonde. "Your full name?" At this, all the students turned to look at Naruto. He had a longer name. They had never paid much attention to him, and since there wasn't an Uzumaki clan compound, they had just assumed his parents were either civilians or forgettable ninja that had died when he was young or something. Naruto sighed before he replied, "Yay, since I was 8. My old sensei told me the whole story." Whoa, wait, Naruto had a sensei when he was young. That explained how he showed up and started doing as decently as he was, as well as his 2-year absence from the village. But what was this whole thing about his name? "Guess the Hokage wanted it to be known finally, so do you mind?" inquired Ayuka. If he told these kids, there was no doubt the news would spread like wildfire among the village. Knowing the villagers, they would either riot in denial, though not very likely, or turn Naruto into a damn celebrity. And he knew Naruto wasn't comfortable with either of those options. Yay, sure. I can handle any backlash it may cause now. I have a feeling the Hokage is prepared as well if he's releasing it, sighed Naruto. This was gonna be a long day. Okay, if you say so. The final member of Team 7 is Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze. It took most of the others to remember why that name was famous, but when it clicked, their jaws dropped. Naruto was the son of their Yondaime Hokage. Due to the shock, Kiba accidentally said what everyone else was thinking. Holy shit, Naruto is the son of the Kiroi Senko, Yellow Flash. The only ones not shocked at this discovery were Yakumo and Ino. When Naruto had told them he would share his secrets, he damn well meant it. He had told them everything. The fox, his heritage, his sensei, why he met his sensei, all of it. Iruka coughed as a way to try and regain some semblance of order in the class. Team 7, your Junin sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. At this, Naruto was surprised. Why wasn't Kakashi teaching the Uchiha kid? He was the only one in the village who could possibly train the kid on how to use his Sharingan. Team 8 will be Shikamaru Nara, Hinata Hyuga, and Kiba Inazaka. Your sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. There was no whoop or anything. After that bombshell, the kids had been stunned to silence. Taking advantage of the unusual drop in volume in the class, Iruka continued. Team 10 under Asuma Sarutobi will consist of Shino Aburame, Choji Akamichi, and Sasuke Uchiha. Grabbing his clipboard and some papers, Iruka said his final words to his now ex. Students, I'm proud of you guys. Remember, my door is always open to any of you. It was an honor teaching you kids. Be safe out there. With that, Iruka bowed and the kids bowed to him as a sign of respect to the man. And with that, Iruka left the room. Before the kids could begin pestering Naruto with questions, Hayate and Genma showed up to grab their teams. Not seconds later, Asuma and Kurenai showed up as well to take their teams. As soon as the room was cleared, Yakumo and Ino looked at Naruto with concerned eyes. You sure you're gonna be able to handle it, Naruto? You remember what you told us might happen if the village ever found out, right? Questioned an oddly kind Ino. Yakumo was a girl of few words and simply wrapped her hands around his arm and laid her head on his shoulder. Had this been another time, Naruto's fellow blonde would have made a scene, but now was not the time. Naruto needed all the support he could get. With that in mind, she mirrored Yakumo. Sighing yet again, yay, I'll be fine. As long as I don't start getting gray hairs from all this sighing I'm doing today, haha. Taking his arms out of the grasp of the girls and wrapping an arm around each of the girls' waists, he continued with a grin. Besides, I got two beautiful and strong kunoichi by my side, right? Of course. Spoke a blushing yet still pumped Yamanaka. You bet, Naru, murmured the very comfortable genjutsu user. Though I wonder where our sensei is, she continued. Oh right, almost forgot about that. Hey Inu, you can come out now. Naruto spoke, surprising the girls. Then they sensed it too. The chakra sitting at Iruka's desk. Turning, they saw a silver-haired man wearing the standard Junin uniform with his Hitai.8 covering his left eye, with his feet on the desk reading a certain little orange book. They both face-palmed at that. How the hell had they missed the guy? Guess they had been too worried about Naruto to notice. They made a note to not let that happen again. Had this been anywhere else, they very well could have been dead and Naruto wouldn't always be there to save them. I was originally gonna give you three a teamwork test, but seeing your current position, I believe that may be a moot point, drawled the man. Yakumo said calmly, so you're the famous Kakashi Hitaki, huh? Our village's own Sharingan no Kakashi. They had been taught by Naruto that getting to know your allies was just as crucial as getting to know your adversaries. One of the Leaf's best Junin and son of Tsukumo Hitaki, the Konoha no Shiro Kiba, White Fang of Kana. We got a pretty good sensei, didn't we, Ruto-kun? Said Ino with a grin. The information these two had on Kakashi shocked him greatly. The majority of Chunin were unaware of his father's identity or his past actions. I suppose he had to take this even more seriously than he had initially intended. Naruto said, nicely done, girls, but you're forgetting one last little tidbit, with a smile. With his hand extended, Naruto turned to face Kakashi and said, he was also the student of my father in the second incarnation of Team 7 and only a few years later was a well-known Anbu captain and was in the running for taking the position of head of the Anbu Black Ops. He was also one of the few people who ever gave a shit about me. How've you been, Inu.ni? Concluded the now smiling genin. Kakashi simply shook his head and laughed. With this team, he was truly in for it. Good to see you again too, Naruto.ni. Okay, so now that we are an official team, we need to get some things out of the way first. You three know each other better than anyone else in this whole village, but as your sensei I need to know you three just as well so we can actually work together efficiently. The three genin nodded. He was correct. If their Junin leader knew very little about them and their styles, it didn't matter that they could collaborate perfectly. With the exception of Naruto, he was stronger and had a lot more experience than them. Even still, he did have an edge over even Naruto. He had been raised and fought in the last great ninja war and had seen and done things they may never have to. So to start it off, let's share our likes, dislikes, hobbies, your dream for the future as well as general strength level as well as what you think your specialty is. Pointing at the sole person with a normal hair color on the team, he said, "Why don't you go first, Shy One?" At that comment both Naruto and Ino chuckled. "Yakumo? Shy?" With a noticeable tick mark she began, "First off, I'm not shy, you damn scarecrow. I just prefer not to say much, got it? Anyways, my likes are Naru.kun, Ino, and T. My dislikes, when Ino tries to steal my Naru.kun from me, people who intrude on me when I'm trying to get some peace and quiet, arrogant jerks, and people who use others. My hobbies include painting, observing others, meditating, and sight seeing. My dream for the future is to have a happy family with Naru.kun. My general strength level, well, Naru.kun says I'm around low Junin level without my genjutsu. And my specialty is of course my genjutsu, though I'm fairly decent at Iryo jutsu as well as stealth. An assassin who can make her genjutsus come to life. If there was ever more of a perfect assassin, she'd be it. Alright Blondie, you're up next. At this both Naruto and Ino looked at each other questioningly. Kakashi's sweat dropped. He oops. A female Blondie, you go next I guess. Deadpanning Ino started, "Dumbass. My likes are Ruto.kun, Yakumo, my family, and vegetable stew. My dislikes are people who purposely destroy nature, Yakumo when she tries to butt in on my Ruto time, assholes, and fangirls. Of course my hobbies are tending to my family garden, spending time with Ruto, and studying the mind arts. My dream for the future is to be a good clan head and have a bunch of little blonde children with Ruto.kun. My strength level, well, I'm not as good as Yakumo yet, but Ruto says I'm around high Chunin level. My specialty is of course my clan's jutsu, meaning I'm great for recon and interrogation. I'm also pretty good with poisons and the like. I'm actually pretty good at Iryo jutsu too," boasted the proud Yamanaka. Can't say I blame the girl. A year ago she was a fangirl herself, and to have reached her skill level in that time gives her right to be proud. But still she's pretty much strictly a support member and sadly at this time our weakest link when compared to her teammates. However, Naruto is probably working on getting her up to snuff, so no worries yet. Well, now onto our last member. "Your turn, Short Stack," the Junin said with a teasing eye smile. How the hell could an eye smile be teasing? The teen grew a tick mark. I grew, damn it. And he was right. When he was a kid he had been rather malnourished and so was pretty short for his age. But now, Naruto stood at a good 5 foot 5 inches, which was a good solid height for his age. With a gasp, Naruto said, "My likes are Yakumo. Chan, Ino. Chan, my old sensei Vincent. Ramen, and the color orange. My dislikes are arrogant assholes, child abusers, a certain Uchiha, and people who judge others." Kakashi became intrigued by the comment regarding a certain Uchiha. Uchiha? Itachi never did anything to harm the child, and there are only 2 left in the world. Naruto actually adored Itachi. Furthermore, from what I understand, Sasuke and Naruto could not give a damn about each other. Who might it be? My hobbies include training, reading, researching, working on my own seals, and fighting people who give me a challenge. My strength level, without the help of my tenant, I'd say about Junin or Anbu level. I haven't really had a reason to use Kyuubi's chakra, but I can control up to 3 tails perfectly. At the 4th tail I can somewhat control it, but my bloodlust becomes hard for me to fight back. At 5. Yay, let's hope none of you are around if I ever have to use 5 tails. My specialties are Fuinjutsu, Ninjutsu, and Kenjutsu. I'm decent at all other ninja arts. Naruto finished like he was talking about the weather. Oh yeah, I forgot that because of Kyuubi I'm an empath. It makes me a sensor of sorts. He's that strong at 14. Holy crap. And without the Kyuubi, too, it's likely that this child will outshine Jiraiya. I might as well give him the team. I suppose Hokage Sama was correct. If I want to keep up with these kids, I'll need to get stronger. The Scarecrow clapped his hands together and grinned, saying, "Well, I guess it's my turn. My likes, my dislikes, good question. My hobbies are R-rated hee. My strength, well, you guys seem to know that pretty well. My specialty is ninjutsu and assassination, just you at that. Though I know my fair share of destructive jutsu as well. He looked at his team, expecting them to be disappointed, but instead he saw that Naruto was eating ramen and that Ino and Yakumo were discussing clothes. Immediately, Kakashi was crouching in a corner of the rooftop, covered by a miniature rain cloud. "You guys are so mean," he said, realizing that they wouldn't care for a while. Then, with another smile, Kakashi started talking again. "Well, I had originally planned on testing you guys, but again, that's a moot point. Instead, you have the day off and come tomorrow we will begin training. Our schedule will be Monday, Tuesday, intensive training. Wednesday through Friday will be group exercises as well as missions. Saturday and Sunday will be time to relax. Meet at training ground 7 tomorrow morning at 6. Ya ne?" Kakashi then left. "So Ruto, tomorrow we start?" Ino inquired. "Yup, now that the council has no say in what we do and now that we have a Junin sensei to back us, the real training begins tomorrow," Naruto responded. At this, Yakumo and Ino both sighed. It appears that Naruto style boot camp was back in session. A month had passed since Team 7 was officially introduced as Konoha's team, and not much had changed in the village. Not even the people on Team 7 had changed much. Naruto continued to dress in the same manner as he had since the academy, but he now carried a katana at his left hip and typically wore his tattered cloak over it, leaving it unzipped. There was a black tassel hanging from the pommel of the deep crimson red hilt. Although Kakashi remained a lazy and pervert, his fellow Jonin sensed a shift in his aura. The tone of laziness was still there, but beneath it was a well of power that had recently been discovered. Everyone was aware of Kakashi's strength, but it appeared that he had a renewed desire to become even more powerful. Yakumo had made the most significant alteration, dressing entirely differently. She was wearing black shinobi sandals and tight black shinobi pants that were taped at the ankle. She wore a deep purple sweater with sleeves that reached her hands over a mesh top and a black tank top underneath. Naruto had drawn seals inside the sleeves that contained her paintbrushes, senbon, kunai, and shuriken. Several poisons that Ino had actually created especially for her were applied to those same weapons. Some of them knocked her victims out, paralyzed them, kept them awake longer, or simply killed them right there. Like a certain Arankar from Bleach, she had started talking with her sleeves pulled up over her mouth. With the exception of carrying 2 scrolls stacked on top of one another at the small of her back, Ino had remained largely unchanged. A single scroll held a variety of poisons intended for adversaries. The one beneath that one had various medical supplies in case anyone needed her help. The training had initially been a little rough as the 3 genin tried to get used to Kakashi and vice versa. After overcoming that obstacle, training proceeded smoothly. Even the Hokage was unaware of the team's strength because Kakashi would only tell him, "The team works seamlessly together as a unit and each of us has grown in some way." Naturally, this infuriated the man greatly because he had wanted Kakashi to be their sensei in order to have some sort of insider knowledge. Even though he had serious doubts that they were considering betraying the village, he still felt uneasy about his soldiers' strength. "Our Hokage and the Ninja Council are currently addressing the aforementioned team. So as I understand, Junin Hitaki, you wish for permission to leave the village for 2 months on a training trip. What exactly would warrant this?" The members of the Ninja Council were equally interested. A genin team had never made a request like this before, much less one this new. Junins and Chunins alike. "Yes, but right out of the academy? Never before?" The powerful member of the team said, "If I may, Hokage, Sama." Although he did a good job of hiding it, the man was still extremely offended to hear a teenager he had once bottle-fed and cared for call him that. He was the only one responsible for it. He waved, "You may, genin." Naruto said, "Well, sir, the reason we feel it would benefit us is," before the civilian council members slammed open the chamber doors. At this, everyone in the room squinted. They had no right to interrupt this. One unremarkable council member yelled, "What is the meaning of this, Hokage? Holding a meeting without us?" The small group of civilians was filled with shouts of agreement. Also making their way to the front of the crowd were Sarutobi's former teammates and had winner. "Indeed, Hiruzen. What are you doing performing such things behind our ba?" Many were brought to their knees when Hiruzen yelled, "Enough!" and flared both his chakra and his ki, killing intent. "I have seen you all destroy my sensei's village while insulting me in my position, and I've had enough of it. You have all forgotten that this is no democracy. This is a shinobi village and you are all civilians. Meaning you have absolutely no say in how I command my soldiers," he continued, gesturing to Kaharu, Homura, and Danzo. "And you 3, you seem to have forgotten your place as well. You do not tell me what to do. You are my advisors, which means you advise me and nothing more. I have the last say on all matters of this village, you do not," he said, releasing a great deal of chakra that made even some of the clan heads perspire. The crowd erupted in strained, "Yes Hokage, Sama," murmurs. Once again, Sarutobi sat down and spread his chakra, allowing the civilians to stand. Good. I hope I don't have to do this again. Anbu, escort these people out. When the civilians were eventually removed from the room, it was with complaints. You were saying Genin Namikaze? He intoned, gesturing with his hands as if nothing had occurred. I suppose I influenced the elderly man that evening. I'm glad you're returning, Naruto, grinning. He coughed and replied, yes, well, as it stands, my team and myself have need of more space to practice both our own individual techniques as well group ones that would cause quite a bit of collateral damage to the village and any training ground in the village. The ever stoic head of Hyuga asked, and what of the Forest of Death, or even the training fields behind the Hokage Monument? Would they not meet your needs? Or even the Anbu training grounds? Those are made to handle such things, the untamed Sume Inazaka went on. Naruto asked, if I may be blunt, Council and Hokage? With their blessing, he bluntly said, normally yes, but the use of my furry tenant is included in some of these as well as Yakumo's own bloodline. We also cannot get real-world experience here in the village, and being honest, we knew you would never permit our group to even attempt higher-ranking missions, so we figured that if we went out to train we would encounter people to test us. Children are incredibly intelligent, was the Ninja Council's collective opinion. A startled Nara Shikaku said, Hokage, Sama, if I may? I think this may prove to be quite the boon for us as a village in quite a few ways. Not only will we have possibly one of our strongest Junins accompany possibly our strongest Genin squad outside, they could, for the lack of a better term, serve as advertisements to both our allies as well as our enemies. Seeing that he had captured everyone's attention, Shikaku sighed again and continued, by sending out these four they would obviously encounter both our allies as well as enemies. Of course, we all know that this particular team is obviously far from average, but those who would serve as messengers of this news don't have to. As he spoke, everyone in the room grinned at how cunning it was all. You can't blame them, you know. These individuals have been trained to employ any strategy to win a conflict or, in this instance, prevent one from ever occurring. It was cunning, dishonest, and covert. That is, the ideal strategy for a community of skilled killers. A few minutes later, Team 7 was leaving the Hokage Tower with a scroll that had been signed by the Hokage and all of the Ninja Council members, giving them nearly Sannin travel privileges. It was weeks later we find Team 7 sitting around a campfire after having returned from gaining the bounty of yet another overly cocky missing nin. This had been taken care of by Ino personally. He had said something about her being a bimbo and the rest of the team knew to let her handle it. It was only by sheer luck that they had been able to save the head from being melted by a corrosive acid that Yamanaka had injected into the man. Via a rather uncomfortable place that things should not be injected into. Within the span of a few weeks the team had managed to grow even more as a team thanks to them not having to worry about endangering any innocents. The only innocents that suffered were the poor innocent trees they slaughtered on a regular basis. Naturally, they were able to practice some of their individual skills, but the main goal of the trip was to help them become even more accustomed to one another so that they could more readily coordinate both their individual and team attacks. These same team attacks included everything from minor jutsu moves and taijutsu combos to massively coordinated jutsu combos. As a team, they were nearly unbeatable, but as individuals, particularly Naruto and Kakashi, they were powerful and intimidating. They had finally discovered that Naruto and Kakashi were tied for wins and losses in their spars, and that Naruto stood without the assistance of his tenant. Ino gained a great deal of useful experience in healing burns, cuts, gashes, broken bones, and several other potentially fatal wounds from these fights, which appeared more like death-defying battles. Naturally, Naruto didn't require assistance in that area. In fact, Naruto had become interested in the subject. He had previously experienced the telltale symptoms of the bloodlust and rage of said chakra beast whenever he had used even the smallest amounts of Kyuubi's chakra, but after being healed, he no longer experienced any of those emotions. In light of this, he decided to use his alone training time today to get some answers to some questions. He soon found himself in the sewer that was his mind after descending into a meditative state. No matter how well life was going for him, it remained a sewer even though it had become fairly clean in recent years due to his new outlook on life. The walls appeared much cleaner, the pipes that symbolized his chakra pathways shone a brilliant bronze, and the waters had subsided until they only resembled a puddle. The strongest of the Biju lived in an open chamber, which the young Uzumaki reached by following the pipes and the massive power source. Naturally, despite being a huge construct of chakra, the Kyuubi was still a kitsune, which is why our hero now discovers the fox in its sleeping form. Naruto was now faced with a conundrum. He needed to figure out how to awaken the enormous fox without causing it any agitation. He would be expelled from his own damn mind and receive no answers if he irritated it. The fox behaved like a teenager despite its advanced age. Either that or the person the fox was being held in had an impact on it. With his hands folded behind him, Naruto paced back and forth, trying to come up with a nice way to wake up the sleeping furball. Without getting my ass chewed out. Naruto paced for 5 minutes before snapping his fingers. Here, we are discussing a gigantic fox. A giant rabbit is the ideal way to wake up a giant fox. The blonde pictured a fluffy white bunny, but on a much larger scale, taking advantage of the fact that this was his mind. And that image became physical with a poof. Mental? It developed. It nearly dwarfed him in size. The next thing he knew, he had enormous bunny blood all over him after he sent it into the cage. He looked up to see the Biju cleaning the blood off its fur and smiling at him. It lowered itself onto its haunches and rested its head on its front paws, looking boredly at its jailer. Well, my host, that was a good little treat. Now, I assume you woke me for some reason or another. I may be in a decent mood, but I would much like to get back to my nap, so if you would please hurry. Well, I know that because I have you stuck in me, my empath sense has become something akin to radar. I was just wondering if that would be passed down along with the Uzumaki vitality and all that. Naruto nodded. Right. Well, I just got a couple of questions you may have the answers to. Seeing that the fox appeared slightly more interested, he went on. Well, yes, it would be possible. It would require some work on both our parts. You are correct. I am the reason the sense was heightened to unseen levels, and it's that very reason that should you mate with a female, normally the offspring would not be born with the power. I would have to pump some of my own yoki into your sperm, infusing them with said yoki to make it possible. At that, the blonde adolescent nodded. It was logical. He wouldn't have had the power at all if he hadn't had the Kyuubi. The only thing is that the child will not have it anywhere close to your level. Because you have my chakra constantly being siphoned into your body, the sense has become dependent on it. It's using my yoki as a source of energy. Since the child will not have the yoki constantly flowing through its pathways, the sense will not have enough energy to work to its full potential. The kitsune was lectured. Yay, that does make sense. Alright, thanks. My other question is about my healing factor. I know we Uzumaki are extremely durable, and I've become even more so thanks to you, but whenever my healing factor kicks in, I know it's not your yoki that's doing it. Why is my healing factor so advanced? Well, your healing prowess is thanks to a lot of different factors. Part of it is your Uzumaki blood, another part is having me, another part is this damn seal here, and the last part is your father's blood. The fox paused to stretch before continuing. Naruto was taken aback at this. The blood of his father. The man had never been able to identify his parents because he was an orphan. What could have contributed to his ungodly healing factor in his blood? Furthermore, how on earth did the fox recognize them? Don't worry, I'll get to that, but first my part in it. You see, the seal you have on you may be vastly different from that of your mother and your ancestor Mito, but they also serve the same basic principle, binding me to them damn near down to the soul. Because of this I have absorbed some qualities from them and vice versa. Your seal is much different in that you are allowed access to much more of my power, but in exchange we are quite literally bonded at the soul. This has allowed for some of my own qualities to seep into you. So my own greatness combined with the vitality of two very powerful Uzumaki women, and you have become close to being immortal. Normally the only way that you would possibly be able to die would be via decapitation or someone ripping out your beating heart. Anything short of that and you'll be coming back. You'd also be victim to the ravages of time, eventually. Probably not until you hit your hundreds or so, but you'd still fall victim to time. It looked like the Kyuubi had finally finished, but with a pointed look Naruto shut his mouth. Now, one of the most interesting things that contributes to your healing is your father's blood. How much of the inner workings do you know about your father's famed Hirishin? He had obviously studied the notes on the technique, even though he hadn't been able to fully master it yet. It was a masterpiece of Fuinjutsu, nearly as good as the one on his stomach. Well, I know that the basic principle of it is that it bends the fabric of space and time around two certain points, the seal marker and the user. Using chakra, the user is able to make a tunnel of sorts between the 2 points, making travel in between the points instantaneous. It's one of a small handful of known Jikukan, time, space, jutsu. Yes, and the other Jikukan techniques are not nearly as impressive. Do you realize what you have just said? Your father is bending the very fabric of the universe to his whim with naught but his chakra. If he had lived to be as old as the monkey, I have no doubt he would have been able to use the technique without the marker. But back on topic. What your father is doing is something not even most of us Biju are able to do. I myself only have a very rudimentary ability to do something similar, and I'm thousands of years old, spoke the now clearly aware Kitsune. Even though it was once upset with the man, It had to show respect for someone who could use a highly developed Jikukan jutsu to reroute a Bijudama, tailed beast ball. Naruto's mouth fell open as he finally understood the true nature of the technique. His father was literally playing Kami. To be honest, the marker seals weren't that complicated. He had been able to understand a chunk of them after a couple of months and all of them after 3 years. What the hell else was his father doing that could possibly make such a thing possible? The teenager looked at the enormous Kitsu inquisitively as he heard the loud voice say, "It's not what your father was doing but more like what his chakra was doing." What does his chakra have to do with this? Every living thing on this planet has an affinity. Everything from you ninja down to the smallest insect has an affinity to one or more of the elements. Some fall into the main 5 of fire, water, earth, wind, and lightning. Others however fall into elements such as ice, magma, metal, and even light and dark themselves. Your father was from a very unique clan thought to have died out during the clan wars. That clan was responsible for the handful of known Jikukan techniques. The Namikaze clan was a clan feared by many for their jutsu and their affinity to Jikukan. Others looked at them as demons as they believed only the gods should be able to mess with time and space. Eventually the clan grew too full of themselves and attempted to time travel and plane jump. They failed and the backlash caused by that failure cost them more than half of their numbers. The other clans heard of their weakened state and pounced. Soon the clan had been erased from the annals of history for fear that others would attempt to recreate their techniques. Only someone the age of your Shoden would have any kind of knowledge on that clan. Naruto sat there awe-struck. He was not from just one clan that had been wiped out due to fear of their strength but two. But what made them so special? I mean, what gave them their affinity to Jikukan? I myself do not know of their origins as they had been around when the Rakudo Sennin was alive. However, I do know that their chakra had special properties. Much like Uzumaki chakra grants the user vitality and endurance, Namikaze gifts them with dense and powerful chakra. Their chakra was so thick and strong they could bend the universe as they pleased. It's that very chakra that allowed your father to invent the technique that gave him his name, and it's that very chakra that now runs through your veins. But how does that affect my healing? The Namikaze clan were like the Uzumaki in that because of the properties of their chakra and blood they were harder to kill than the average human. With the Namikaze their cells reproduced so rapidly and for so long that they had become near invulnerable to the destruction of time. Your mother looked to be in her 20s well into her 30s and your father was much the same. You probably look 20 well into your 60s. You my vessel are the closest to being immortal any ninja has ever gotten. Too stunned to talk, Naruto sat on his ass. He took great satisfaction in his ability to restrain his emotions and avoid appearing foolish, but this was only one instance. How could he not be taken aback? At 14, he was more close to being a kami than anyone else in the elemental nations. He was almost perfect in every way. To be great, he was bred. Naruto sat there staring like a fish and said, just. The kitsune let out a sweat drop. It might have said too much at once. It kept on coughing. Yes, well, that may well be a very intelligent response in the making. You would do well to remember who is after you and who else would come for you if they knew what you do. You may have the potential to even equal me, but without the training to use any of it properly, that's all it will be, potential. As it stands, you are indeed strong, but nowhere near the level of those who would see you dead or under a microscope. Naruto simply nodded, his mouth still agape from the shock of it all. This time, the kitsune's sweat drop was considerably bigger. Naruto was banished from his thoughts with the words, "I'll leave you to cope then." After a week, we discover our main character alone, meditating. He had started to push his own training to even higher levels after learning everything from his tenant. He apologized to Yakumo and Ino for having to give them to Kakashi so they could continue their training, but they accepted his apology. They were even more motivated to get stronger as a result. They would need to be as strong as they could be if they intended to support their blonde crush through the enemies and predicaments he would encounter. Kakashi had acknowledged this as well and had even promised to attend. They were his students, and he would assist them in any manner he could. The teenager was currently meditating in order to feel the various chakras moving through his body. Naturally, the various chakras had merged into one flawless, balanced source since he was born with them, and they had consequently grown into him. Nonetheless, he was still able to sense the various attributes of his chakra. It seemed as though Kyuubi's Yoki, Namikaze, and Uzumaki were all rivers that poured into the lake that was his chakra. He had to be able to distinguish between each in order to start using their powers. For him, performing an Uzumaki technique with Namikaze chakra might not go as planned. He found it strange that chakra seemed to have an emotion of some kind. Perhaps because of his empathy, he was the only one who could sense it, but it was there. Perhaps it was related to the chakra itself. Perhaps it was similar to blood in that it contained remnants of his ancestor. Oh no. This is getting off topic. Alright, let me check. Naruto rummaged through his chakra pool, thinking, malevolence, anger, superiority, and power. The fuzzball's yoki is unquestionably that. Vitality, energy, life. My Uzumaki chakra is that. Where is it now? Was as far as his mind could go before he experienced it. God damn it. This feeling. Force, dominance, strength. What is this? Does Namikaze chakra feel like this? It's... fuck, screamed the blonde as he squeezed his eyes and held his head. Might controls everything. Nothing, not even yourself, can be protected without it. Echoed a rumbling voice in his head. You are WHO the fuck. Leave my head alone. The blonde screamed in excruciating pain. WHO are you? There is room only for one in this kit's mind and I am it. Leave here no. Kitsune is foolish. You can't control me, keep quiet. The great Kyuubi can be seen inside the cage, trying to assist its vessel by smashing the cage's gates. The Kitsune roars loudly, unleashing 5 tails of power that pour into every nook and cranny of its prison. The strongest Biju said, Kit, as their final words. What do you want and who are you? The terrified teenager screamed. He was no longer able to sense or even hear the Kyuubi. Calm down, kid. I will not hurt that beast or you. Regarding myself, I am your ancestor. Yamato Namikaze is who I am. A stunning teenager said, now where could those flowers be? They shouldn't be this hard to find here. Her dark hair framed her porcelain face. She had the curves to support her age of 16. However, her pink kimono partially concealed her curves. She walked slowly through the forest with a small wicker basket on her right arm. She was about to say, now I could have sworn I saw some of the flowers I need when we walked through this path. Where could? But she stopped herself when she noticed the forest was destroyed. Trees were either sliced clean, burned, or a mix of both. The cratered ground, which appeared to have been struck by a tiny meteor shower, was not any better. She saw the person she believed to be the culprit in a contemplative pose as she ventured deeper into the devastation. It was a teenager about her age, with wild blonde hair that cascaded in soft spikes around his head. She was blushing when the adolescent showed her what kind of training he did without a shirt. A gorgeously made katana with a crimson red hilt and a length of black cloth dangling from the pommel rested on his lap. The teenager said, you know it's kind of rude to stare at someone shirtless, miss. She eeped, before trying to gather her thoughts and laughing. Her mind instantly went to the gutter when she said, yes, well, I was just, admiring your sword. If he's that toned up there, I wonder if. No bad Haku? She asked tremblingly, I mean well, what happened here? The blonde laughed, opening his eyes to show her the most stunning sapphire blue eyes she had ever laid eyes on. He rose from his position on the floor to show that he was a couple inches taller than her. He grabbed his ragged black cloak from a hanging tree branch and threw it on, leaving it unzipped. He walked up to her carrying his blade in his left hand lazily. Each step he took closer to her, her blush grew darker. An arm's distance away he lifted his hand to offer a handshake. My name's Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze, spoke the blonde Adonis, with his foxy grin plastered on his face. Slipping her hand in his, she nervously chuckled and said, Haku Momoichi. So what are you doing out in this part of the forests of Hai no Kuni? Inquired our blonde protagonist from his sitting position. He of course had an inkling of what she was doing here, but hey, he could be wrong. Oh. The dark-haired teen frantically shot to her feet and began to gather her things. I'm actually here looking for a specific type of herb. What kind of herb? I might be able to help, volunteered our hero. Before anything more could be said, both individuals could feel a spike of charka, which meant a battle. Haku narrowed her eyes as she could see the hints that the Kirigakure no Jutsu, hidden mist, had been used, and she knew only one person in this area who used that technique in battle. Naruto had of course noticed much before Haku had, but kept it from showing on his face. He knew the name Momoichi and the person causing the charka spike. One Zabuza Momoichi. The demon of the bloody mist and former member of the Kirin no Shinobigatana Shichinen Shu, 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. He knew Zabuza was a powerful enemy, and a couple months ago Kakashi would have been able to go toe-to-toe with the guy with some difficulty. But that was not the Kakashi the so-called demon was fighting. This Kakashi was the Junin who was trained by the Kiroi Senku of Konoha. The same man who knew over 1,000 jutsu and had created 2 jutsu unique to him. Zabuza frankly stood no chance. I apologize Naruto-kun, but I must be going now, and with that the ice user was gone. She forgot her basket. Guess I should return it to her. Whistling a jaunty tune of some sort, Naruto leisurely made his way to where he knew the fight was taking place. The sounds of steel clashing against steel echoed through what was once a thick forest, now being a man-made clearing. Come on Zabuza. Where is that famous demon of the mist at? Spoke a smirking Kakashi. Geez, I really gotta stop letting those three rub off on me. I was never this battle happy, but I do admit it is pretty fun. The shirtless swordsman merely grunted in response. I know that he was feared for a reason, but this is ridiculous. He's fighting back my attacks using only kunai. Yakumo and Ino sat atop a tree branch not too far away enjoying the show. Individually Zabuza would be a problem, but together Yakumo and Ino were confident enough to be able to handle him. Besides, Kakashi was handling things well enough and they could feel Naruto making his way over. Hey Ino, you want her or should I? Spoke a smirking Yakumo. Oh. Well, I got the last one so you can go ahead, spoke a grinning blonde. Geez, Naruto had really done a number on them. Haku came blazing into the clearing intent on helping her master. Preparing some senbon, she was about to throw them to at least throw Kakashi off. Zabu was all she could get out before she received a sandal to her stomach. She was thrown clear into a tree with enough force to splinter it. Giggling from behind her sleeve, the genjutsu user mocked, "Nah. My sensei is enjoying the fight and a 2-on-1 fight is hardly fair, so just sit there and watch, okay?" She turned to leave the girl but would have been skewered by senbon had she not vanished. Haku's eyes widened. Where did she? You know I get that we're ninja and all, but really? When my back is turned? Haku would have moved if she didn't feel the cold steel of a sharpened kunai at her throat. The dark-haired ice user witnessed Zabuza get thrown clear across the forest via Kakashi's use of a dodenjutsu from her downed position. With a steely look in her, she prepared herself for what she was going to do. I must help Zabuza Sama at any cost. She formed the one-handed seals for her signature jutsu. As she formed the last of the seals, she threw her head back against Yakumo's abdomen, allowing her enough room to escape. Hijutsu. Mikio Hyosho. Secret art. Demonic ice mirrors, she exclaimed with a chakra burst. The brunette teen was ensnared in the icy trap by a dome of said mirrors that formed around her. The solemn Haku said, I apologize for having to use this technique on you, but I must help my master. She detested using this method since it required her to deliver a lethal blow, which she preferred not to do. She was never comfortable with killing. She expected to see some fear in the girl as she got ready to break up the fight as soon as possible, but all she saw was her body trembling. I'm sorry, but I have to assist Zabuza Sama. She must be crying because she doesn't want to die. Haku watched as the young girl was transformed into a pincushion after launching the senbon with that final thought. Haku cast a shamed glance down. When Haku looked up, she saw her reflection start to change into the brunette's form. "Aw, you think you killed me?" she asked. What, how? Haku attempted to get out of the mirror but was trapped inside it. Well, you see, you've made your own grave with this technique. You showed your full hand to finish a battle you thought would be easy without knowing the cards your enemy held. She has deceived me with my own method. How? Haku heard, "Let me introduce myself," from behind her. She turned and saw the girl she believed to be dead standing in a field of recently fallen snow. My name is Yakumo Kurama. Haku started to perspire at that point. Even though she wasn't from Konoha, the Kurama family was renowned across the country for their ability to make their genjutsu a reality. Haku started to panic when she noticed something rising from the snow. Now I would rather not have to do this, but you've left me no choice. Goodbye, Miss Ice User. They resembled frozen corpses that had been extricated from the depths of hell. Shutting her eyes, she braced herself for the inevitable. I apologize to Zabuza Sama for letting you down. Before she heard the sound of something hitting flesh and an even louder yelp of pain, she was prepared to accept her fate. When she opened her eyes, she saw the brunette who was going to kill her using her own method on the ground, holding her behind in agony, and the blonde she had met in the forest. The absurdity of the situation only made her perspire. Although she was on the verge of death, she was spared because the girl who was going to murder her had been spanked. Now Yakumo, normally I would congratulate you, but considering I would much like to keep our lovely Yuki Onna, Snow Woman, here alive and unharmed, well, you see what happened. Naruto-kun, what are you doing here? She asked the extremely inquisitive ice user after controlling her blush. Yakumo could only say, hey, wait a minute, Naruto-kun, where do you think? Before getting slapped on her still tender butt. The genjutsu practitioner pouted, Naru-kun, what was that for? Instead, the blonde reprimanded, Play nice Yakumo and I'll tell you later. Here to save you of course. Now let's see what we can do about your father, nay, he replied, turning to face Haku. When Haku was reminded of Zabuza and his current role, his eyes widened. Before being flicked on the nose, she only heard, Zabu. She pouted as she looked at Naruto, her face scrunching up at the flick. Why is no one letting me finish my sentences today? Cause we can, the cheeky blonde smiled. Now let's get out of here. The frozen wasteland vanished in an instant, to be replaced by Zabuza speeding across the field while Kakashi pursued him with Reikiri, lightning edge, in hand. Naruto appeared before Kakashi caught his wrist before he could land the final blow, as if he had been dazed out of existence. Kakashi just raised his head and gave his pupil a curious look. The only thing the Jinchuriki said was, potential allies, and Kakashi simply nodded. It was logical. The village would benefit from Zabuza and his apprentice. Strangely, Zabuza glanced up at the kid who had saved him. Why did he look familiar, and who the devil was he? I'm positive I've seen that blade previously. What about the hair? Who is this child? If Haku hadn't hurried over to Zabuza, he would have carried on thinking. He saw that the girl appeared to be upset about something. Hey, why are you looking so down, Haku? The swordsman grunted. It appeared that he was still a tough ass even when he was dying. I was worried I would lose you. I thought I had failed, she said, sniffling, but Zabuza interrupted her by pondering her hair. Hey, you did good. It's my fault we ended up in this situation. I thought they were here for the bounty on my head or something like that, he said after learning that Kakashi and his group made an effort to appear innocent. Well, thanks to Naruto.kun. Zabuza was teased. Hey, whoa there, kun. Why is no one letting me finish my sentences? Haku only received a tick mark, and everyone in the room laughed at the poor girl's expense. Naruto approached the two after they had all recovered their breath. The blonde Uzumaki said, well, I actually have a question for you too. How would you like to stop having to constantly look behind your backs? Zabuza gazed at the teenager wearily. Hold on, what are you saying? Well, I have some pull with the Hokage and I'm sure if I vouched for you too you would have no problem becoming a part of Konoha's forces. My family name would also help with the villagers and all as well. Casually said. None of it was incorrect on his part. Zabuza just grunted and used his enormous blade as a crutch to slowly stand up. That reminds me. You and that blade you have there look really familiar to me. What's your name, kid? With a steely gleam in his eyes, the Kyuubi container held out his hand and said, name's Naruto, Naruto Uzu. Before snatching up Zabuza and Haku in a display of speed and bringing them to his teammates. What's his motivation? A pack of those nefarious things he had seen when he first began training years ago. However, they appeared to be out for blood this time. His fellow blonde exclaimed, what the fuck are those? And everyone else in the room agreed. Naruto blinked and found himself inches from the object's blade. I don't know, but I need you all to stay here. None of you are in good enough shape to even harm these things. To his surprise, though, his blade was blocked far too easily for him to feel comfortable. In an instant, he was encircled by all the creatures, who were using their spiked limbs as lethal blunt weapons, and he was on the verge of becoming pulp. Before they could reach him, he performed a backflip and landed on top of one of their shoulders. He tried to remove its head by brandishing his blade again. But another of the creatures smashed him in the side, sending him flying into multiple trees with the distinct sound of bone breaking as he hit them. The battle was taking place at speeds far faster than the others could keep up with, and it was already difficult for them to follow all of this. Kakashi's Sharingan was struggling to keep up as well. Yakumo, Ino, and Haku in particular became terrified as soon as they heard and saw Naruto get struck and sent flying into the trees. They were about to leap in and offer assistance when they noticed Naruto struggling to stand up. No, they're not here for you. They're here for me. I can handle this, he grunted, spitting out a wad of blood. However, why are they here to help me? They would leave me alone if I got far enough away because they were never this strong. Why do they want to kill me so badly? They are aware of your identity. They detect it in you. His ancestor's voice was intoned. He tried to attack again, but had to weave through more spiked limbs after quickly raising his katana to block an incoming blow and dodging another. In order to give himself space to breathe, he swiftly leapt away from the pack. Fuck, this is becoming absurd. These animals won't stop until you're dead. Why me? Why now, too? Never before have they been so ruthless. Once more, Naruto had to dodge and weave through a crowd of flying limbs that were determined to smash his head in. They will do whatever it takes to ensure that the Namikaze blood in you is eradicated from this world, but now is not the time to elaborate. Don't waste any more time looking foolish. Get rid of these animals. Yes, I understand. It's time to take things seriously. Naruto let some of his chakra flow out and gather around him with a roar. This was his actual chakra, blazing a royal shade of purple, rather than the division of his various sources. His eyes narrowed, changing from sapphire jewels of laughter to icy chips. He had called it his battle mode because of this. In this state of mind, he was completely emotionless, and his only objectives were to protect those who were important to him and to defeat anyone who stood in his way at all costs. The amount of energy he was exuding astounded his fellow travelers. Kakashi observed how his posture and manner had changed, as well as how his chakra felt. Ino and Yakumo also took notice. Normally, Naruto's chakra exuded a sense of security and warmth, but these emotions were now hidden beneath a well of power and domination. It was rather hot, if they were telling the truth. Having only known the blonde for a short time, Haku and Zabuza were completely taken aback by what this teen was doing. It was practically unheard of for him to be that strong at his age. Haku barely managed to grab the scabbard of Naruto's katana before they had to pick their jaws up off the ground. They looked up to see Naruto twirling his katana by the tassel on its pommel while gazing at the approaching group of creatures. "You asked for my name, right, Zabuza?" they asked. Zabuza could only stare. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. And this was my mother, Kushina Uzumaki's sword." He was the offspring of Kushina Uzumaki, the Konoha no aka Shi, Red Death of Konoha, and Kiroi Senko Minato Namikaze. Naruto threw the blade like a spear as soon as the creatures were within reach, using enough force to pierce through one of the beast's thick hides. In an instant, Naruto was holding his blade again in the middle of the group and slashing endlessly around him, but he knew that the fight was far from over. The animals had a very thick hide and a small amount of healing power, and they were very difficult to put down. The person who was pierced by his blade was still alive. In fact, Naruto calmly said, "Futon. Shinkuken, vacuum sword," while sending Futon chakra through the blade. A dome of pure wind. Natured chakra ensnared the area where Naruto and the creatures were located, cutting off the allies' line of sight. "Wait, that looks more like your Hyuga clan's Hakesho Kaden, heavenly spin," Zabuza let out a sigh. "No, it looks like that because Naruto has created so many slashes with Shinkuken in such a short amount of time they have created that dome," said astonished Kakashi. He was aware that Naruto was good, as evidenced by his scars, but what had he been doing independently over the last few days to become this good? Zabuza's jaw hit the ground once more. In his time, he had witnessed some of the best swordsmen. In fact, he was among the best, but this was amazing. 4 of the 8 creatures were killed when the dome finally collapsed, cutting them short. With those kinds of wounds, they had no chance of recovering. Once more, they were taken aback when those creatures actually did that. Naruto merely sneered. He said, "You guys just don't know when to stop, huh? Fine, let's see how well you handle this, nay." But all he heard was the creature's watery scream as they charged at him again in an attempt to kill him. He used some of his Namikaze chakra to execute his ancestor Yamato's signature move, Judgment Cut. The only thing the others saw were purplish spheres that appeared all over the pack, followed by the beasts exploding from the countless slashes. The creatures appeared to have been sneezed on rather than slashed a million times in a second, which surprised both them and Naruto. Since they are impervious to the effects of time, any Jikukan technique is completely ineffective against them. "Could have informed me sooner, however, I suppose we're going to do this my way." He slid his sword into the ground and performed a series of hand seals before yelling, "Kaden. Hosenka no Jutsu. Fire style. Phoenix Sagefire," and hurling a barrage of tiny fireballs in the direction of the charging pack of monsters. Immediately reaching for his sword, he channeled his Futon chakra through it once more, using the phrase, "Futon, Judgment Cut." This time, spheres of greenish hue surrounded the fireballs, and because the slashes were wind-natured, the fireballs grew larger and flew more fiercely. The creatures kicked up dust and flames as they hit them. But the blonde was far from finished. Going through another sequence of seals, he flashed to the opposite side of where the beasts were and slammed his hands on the ground. Doden. Yomi Numa no Jutsu. Earth Release. Swamp of the Underworld, trapping the pack in a swamp. Despite appearing even worse than before, limbs gone, parts literally melting off at the bone, they miraculously appeared to be able to continue. The Kyuubi container swiftly channeled Raiden chakra through his blade and slammed it into the chakra swamp while yelling, "Raiden. Jibashi, Lightning Release, Electromagnetic Murder." Naruto was able to send large amounts of the lightning nature through each and every one of the grotesque-looking creatures thanks to the various minerals in the earth and the tiny amounts of water acting as conductors. Nobody was able to determine whether or not the creatures were being harmed by the attack because it was so blinding. Naruto flicked the mud off his blade and stopped the chakra flow, feeling that he had managed it sufficiently. Looking out over the devastation he had just caused, the only thing visible in the mud pit were a few charred limbs. Naruto let out a sigh and eased his stance, only to have Yakumo cuddle up to his front and Ino wrap her arms around his neck. His fellow blonde grinned and said, "So it looks like your training went well?" Our protagonist laughed and said, "Haha, yay, you could say that. Big improvement with my kenjutsu too." The team's scarecrow grinned and said, "Yeah, I saw that, kiddo. Your mom would definitely be proud of you and how you're using her blade." To their fury, he put Ino down and slipped his arm out of Yakumo's hold before approaching a red-faced Haku and an injured Zabuza. He extended his hand and grinned at Haku. Before she heard Zabuza laugh at her and gesture to the object she was holding close to her chest, she was completely perplexed by what he was asking for. She gave him his scabbard, giggling in embarrassment as she realized he probably wanted it back. Naruto simply shook his head and laughed at her before putting his sword back in its sheath and holding it loosely in his left hand. "So wanna explain what those things were and how you exactly got that strong and fast?" Kakashi asked, putting a firm hand on his adopted little brother's shoulder as he approached him. "Yay, sure, but it's a long story, so let's move near the river and get comfortable cause it's a pretty long story." That was the consensus. The rest was necessary for them. Haku and Zabuza appeared to be about to depart before Naruto intervened. "And where do you think you guys are going?" Haku opened her mouth to say, but was cut off again before she could say anything. "Didn't I tell you too that you're coming to Konoha to join us?" "You're something else, you know that, kid?" asked Zabuza, who laughed heartily at that and simply shook his head. "Should have met my parents," the grin wearing blonde shot back. Zabuza simply nodded and laughed once more. "Ino here will patch you up once we get to a good spot, alright?" The group eventually arrived at their destination after a leisurely stroll during which Kakashi assisted Zabuza in walking despite his injuries. After placing Zabuza on a patch of grass, Ino set to work repairing him as best she could, while Haku watched. It would be a fantastic opportunity to observe someone who truly knew more about Iryo Jutsu than she did, as she only knew a few very basic techniques. The others positioned themselves on rocks or leaned against them. Naruto crossed his feet into the lotus position and settled down on a sizable boulder. Everyone in the room regarded him sharply, and Naruto sighed as he told them everything that had transpired. His training with his ancestors' assistance, the Kyuubi's increased conversational activity, his training with its abilities, etc. Haku was shocked to learn about the Kyuubi, but Zabuza was well versed in the operations of shinobi villages. He had lived long enough to witness the unfavorable treatment of the majority of Jinchuriki. Haku decided to learn more about the blonde because he had no such experience. Naturally, when Ino and Yakumo noticed the glances Haku was giving their crush, all they could do was sigh and palm their faces. Sometimes Naruto was just too good of a guy. "So what are we going to do about our two passengers here? We aren't due to return back to the village for another 2 weeks, so," replied Kakashi. This decision, in his opinion, belonged to Naruto. He would leave it to him because he had made the decision on all of this. He trusted Narutipi's judgment and knew he wasn't a moron. Naruto was the one who had brought them this far. Kakashi simply nodded and said, "Well, I don't see any harm in letting them come with us on our little training trip. Not like we're giving out village secrets or anything. I'll let the Sandaime know our situation with our next correspondence in a few days." The girls became agitated that an older girl who was clearly crushing on their blonde would be joining them. The next 2 weeks were going to be interesting. "What did you call me, Ice? Bitch, you know damn well what I said, you blonde bimbo. I'll show you why. What the hell are you doing, Yakumo?" For what seemed like the millionth time in one day, the three men in the group simply sighed. Since Zabuza was still recuperating and Haku was attempting to get to know Naruto better, the first 2 days of their trip had been rather uneventful. But the more she found out about the blonde, the more she fell in love with him. He and she had such a similar past that it was actually a little unsettling. Despite their obvious differences, they shared some similarities. They would stop at nothing to keep those who genuinely cared about them safe. In fact, the girls didn't start bumping into each other until the 3rd day. Haku had decided that Naruto was the right man for her and that their shared backgrounds would make them a perfect match. Naturally, Yakumo and Ino were not pleased about this. It was nearly impossible for them to go a day without one agitating the other. Other than shouting and insults, not much happened. They were aware that Naruto would not intervene, but if they got into a fight and truly attempted to hurt one another, he would not put up with it, and none of them wanted to irritate him. Zabuza and Kakashi just sat back and took in the performance. You guessed it, The two had become close because they both loved Icha. In all seriousness, Naruto wondered if the damn thing could be used to make the world a more peaceful place. Naturally, he had read one of the books, but he didn't find it appealing. He couldn't understand why so many people were such ardent fanatics, even though it wasn't as smutty as most people were led to believe. The deep voice of Naruto's prisoner growled, "TCH, pathetic. Hey, at least they're not trapped in the body of a teenager." Naruto grinned triumphantly at the lack of a retaliation. He had grown to love the verbal sparring with the enormous fox over the years. When it outperformed the fix, it was particularly satisfying. The knowledge that he could defeat 1,000-year-old chakra beast in a duel gave him more self-confidence. "Why must you refer to me as if I am genderless or something? Hold on, do you have a gender?" Naruto was completely taken aback. After saying, "Get your blonde ass in here," Naruto vanished from awareness. Naruto spit out in a humorous manner, "What the hell is all this about Kyuubi? I was in a tree, I could have fallen." His only reaction was the shape of a red head that was remarkably attractive as it walked in the direction of the bars. His mind went blank and he was forced to stop thinking. The woman was a manifestation of beauty. She let loose a river of fresh blood that poured from her long, blood-red hair. It reached her mid-back, and her forehead was covered by jagged bangs swept to the right, some of which reached just above her eyelashes. Her crimson eyes were further enhanced by a tiny bit of purple eyeliner applied to them. Her body was slender, with well-placed, healthy curves. A tight, chubby rear end with breasts that Naruto thought were at least D-cup size. With a slit in the right leg that extended to the start of her thigh, her figure was clad in a loose kimono of royal purples and dark reds that reached her calves. The sleeves were detailed with black flames, with the sleeves themselves just stopping short of her knuckles, and the obi was a stretch of pure black that loosely tied around her waist. Her fingernails and toes were painted black, and her feet were bare. There were plenty of attractive women in his age group competing for his attention, but this one was a woman with womanly curves and assessed. As Naruto kept staring at the woman, a tick mark appeared on her forehead. The drool was the only thing he was lacking. Her voice had just the right amount of femininity and raspy. "Come hither," to make it sexy. "You're really no better than your sensei or that old pervert," she said. Naruto became enraged and said, "Hey, I take offense to that. I just have a healthy appreciation for the female body. I hope she purchases that." "Hey dumbass, I can hear thoughts, remember? You, Ria girl? I hate you so much right now, I hope you know that." Naruto's only option was to hang his head in embarrassment. He took great satisfaction in his intelligence and openness to the unexpected, but can you really blame him? He recently discovered that the powerful chakra beast residing in his stomach was a woman, and a very attractive one at that. Now, Calm Biju said, "You're being an idiot aside, why the hell would you just assume I was genderless?" "Well, it's kind of hard to think otherwise. You didn't show any features of being either male or female, and you've even said yourself that you're almost entirely made up of chakra, so I kinda just assumed you were genderless," the blonde defended. "Oh no, he had his reasons. You're made up almost entirely of chakra too, you dumbass. Why do you think jutsu are even possible? Why depleting your chakra stores is life-threatening?" complained the fox. "Chakra is called the essence of life for a reason. When you expend chakra, you are essentially using your life energy." The fox's explanation of the complexities of chakra and other related topics kind of blended together. He was more interested in the scientific connection between the physics of her language and its intensity. Oh no, he was staring at her tits. As retribution, a rather irate kitsune's tail thumped him upside his head. Once more, knowing that he deserved it, he simply bowed his head in shame. A neatly manicured black fingernail raised his chin, revealing that a Kyuubi was a couple of inches taller than him and the said demoness face was inches away from his own at that moment. He was by no means a prude, and you really couldn't be when two of the most attractive kunoichi of his generation were constantly clinging to him. However, once more, they would develop into attractive and seductive women in their own right, but this gorgeous and seductive woman was right next to him. Though he knew that doing so would mean giving up his own life, he was very tempted to let his gaze stray lower on her form. The redhead hotly whispered in his ear, "Now Naru-kun, I would normally beat you to within half an inch of your life for ogling me," sending shivers down his spine from fear and arousal. What was the term Kakashi had mentioned to him once more? Fear. Rection. That's right. Yes, he now completely grasped that idea. "But you see, being as powerful as I am, there has never been a suitable mate worthy of my attention and affection," she said. Our fortunate blonde's only option was to stand as stiffly as she could. The only thing Naruto could do was nod his head stiffly. "You my dear blonde," she said, running her nails over his scalp and combed through his golden locks, "have in the span of 6 years come to be as strong as your own father, who many claimed was one of the strongest to grace this world. The same man who, although with assistance, managed to defeat me." The young blonde was forced to look into her captivating red eyes as she moved far enough to interlock both of her arms behind his neck. "These rubies are far superior to the Sharingan." She paused to draw Naruto close to her. "At the rate you are going in maybe 4 years' time you may well be on my level," she said. As all the blood left his upper body and headed south, he almost lost consciousness. "If she doesn't hurry up, I might just faint. It's strange how I can lose consciousness in my own thoughts. You are among the more attractive of your species and will only become more so as you reach the peak of your body's prowess, and thanks to your blood will remain so for centuries to come." She took hold of his wrists and brought them around her waist, locking the two in a very romantic and intimate position. "What I'm saying is that you my container are the only being worthy of being my mate. And I think I am much better of a choice than those petty human girls," she said. "Don't you think so, Naru-kun?" Our blonde hero gulped and thought strangely that he heard a voice in the back of his mind yell, "Fatality," before passing out. The Kyuubi could only shake her head as his form vanished from his thoughts. "My dear container, I wasn't lying. You are the only person who truly fits me, and I promise that I will have you." Instead of waking up in the real world as Naruto had anticipated, he woke up in the area of his mind that was occupied by his ancestor. He discovered his ancestor as usual, sitting in one of the church's numerous pews and gazing directly at the painting that occupied the entire back wall of what appeared to be a dark Gothic church of some kind. The painting showed a figure brandishing a huge sword of some kind engaged in what appeared to be a defying battle with another figure of a similar nature. The man on the other side of him was wearing a deep purple cloak and wielding a huge scythe, while the figure brandishing the enormous broadsword was dressed in a black cloak. Although Naruto had always pondered who and what the painting actually represented, he didn't give it much thought. Yamato would have informed him by now if he had considered it significant. The blonde in a cloak approached Yamato's row and sat down not far away. After a long silence, Naruto took some time to thoroughly study his ancestor. The man exuded poise and authority. He even wore clothes that reflected that. Yamato was dressed in what Naruto liked to refer to as his casual attire at the time. It included a blue rose in his breast pocket, a silver tie, and a black suit with a dark blue dress shirt. At a solid 6 feet 5 inches, Yamato towered over Naruto. His limber but solid muscles used more for speed than power, and his black slicked back hair and sharp ice blue eyes gave him a regal appearance. Yamato appeared to be in his early 30s. Yamato finally said, "Those creatures have been around for hundreds of thousands of years," after the two had been silent for a few minutes. "They were there when I was alive and probably long before that as well." Naruto was obviously shocked, but he only gave his ancestor a sidelong glance. "I do not know their origins or even the extent of their powers, but I do know this. They are immune to time as a whole, seem to be at least somewhat intelligent, travel in packs, and they maintain the natural balance of things throughout time and space." His blonde descendant gave him a curious look, and he continued, still staring at the painting. "They obey the orders of their master and who I assume to be their creator, a being whose name or face I do not know. All I know about him is that he rules over space and time and despises anyone who is related to us. He despises us because we have the ability to meddle in his kingdom's affairs and exercise authority that he believes belongs only to him. Isn't that right?" Naruto looked directly ahead and spoke in a neutral tone. The only affirmation he received was a slight nod. "A failed attempt at time travel or a plane jump did not bring down our clan, did they?" he asked. "Yes and no, in a way. They made an effort to do so, but I think that even these gods are subject to some laws. I assume that unless their territory is directly threatened in some way, they might not directly meddle in our affairs on our plane." There was a distinct edge to Yamato's voice as he said, "The being used this opportunity to strike at our members. Although the man may come across as aloof and uncaring, he actually loved his family. Do you believe he is aware of me? Or were aware of my father?" "Your dad? No, even though your father was able to accomplish something that I couldn't, his method uses the least amount of namikaze energy in the shortest amount of time. Conversely, you, perhaps. Although I'm not positive, I would exercise caution when applying the higher-ranking strategies." The regal man warned, "If he doesn't know you yet, it would be very beneficial to keep it that way, at least until a time when he won't be able to pose a threat to you and those around you." "Hang on, wait. Do you really think he'll ever be able to defeat a god?" an utterly stunned teenager said. At last, Yamato looked away from the picture and met Naruto's eyes. Ice. Cold blue met sapphire blue, and they held each other's gaze for a while. Nothing was said during this time, not a muscle moved, but a lot was said with this one gaze. Eventually, Naruto tore his eyes away and returned to his composed posture, and Yamato looked back at the painting. "I see," was Naruto's quiet voice. "Yes, and in time you will do," his ancestor's baritone said. There was a period of silence between them before Naruto gradually began to wane. The two exchanged the briefest glances before Yamato was left alone once more. "You will be so strong one day, young one, that the 9 hells will submit to you and the heavens will be brought to their knees. Everyone will be aware of your name, Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze." When Naruto abruptly fell from the tree he was perched in, his group started to worry. They knew that a fall like that would never do much, if any, damage to him of all people, but it was still concerning. Kakashi explained that he had likely been drawn into his mental plane by either the Kyuubi or his ancestor for something significant, which was obviously somewhat true. 3 very excited girls glomped Naruto as soon as he woke up. Before a fight could start, he wrapped his arms around all 3 of them and let his chakra flow around them, showing them what he was unable to say. Kakashi and Zabuza watched with joy, but they knew what this kind of gesture meant. It was romantic, yes, but underneath that was a very somber tone. The only time they had seen this was when someone had accepted a fate that would tear them away from their loved ones. Kakashi got a steely glint in his eyes. Hefting his massive sword onto his shoulder, Zabuza continued, "Kid, you've just made all of our lives a hell of a lot more interesting. I wonder what kind of opponents I'm going to run into now. Gonna need to kick my training into high gear." The following day, we find that each member of the group is training as hard as they can on their own. As leaf ninjas, they certainly enjoyed killing a lot of innocent, helpless trees. When the group heard a hawk screeching, they saw a rather unremarkable brown hawk with the leaf insignia on a leather strip around its torso land on a tree stump. It had a leather scroll case on its back, and inside the case was a scroll with the Hokage's mark on it. When Naruto extended his arm, the hawk moved to his shoulder, opened the case with its beak, and then leaned forward to drop the scroll into his waiting hand. Naruto rewarded it with a berry, and it flew back to Konoha with another screech, flapping its wings. Naruto untied the scroll, read it, rolled it up, and used a minor Kaiden jutsu to burn it. "Guys, get ready. Sandaime has a mission for us. Haku and Zabuza's skills and reliability will also be put to the test. So, you're with me, Haku. You're with Kakashi, Zabuza. The Hokage and the Ninja Council will use our memories of the mission to evaluate you." Before he had finished, the group was packed and prepared to leave. Zabuza had adapted to the group's rhythm easily because she was a member of the 7 Swordsmen and Mist. Kiri's own Anbu was similar. Haku had a little trouble at first, but having Zabuza as a sensei helped her quickly, especially since the object of her affection was now leading her training. In just 3 days, her already incredible speed had increased, and she had even taught the girls how to perform one-handed seals if necessary. "Where did we go to Ruto-kun, then?" asked the team's bossy blonde. "And what precisely are we doing?" the group's Hayatan user asked. With the other members of the group just seconds behind him, Naruto leapt into the trees. Nothing more was said after that. It was mission time. We're off to Nami no Kuni to take out that sleazeball Gato of Gato Industries as well as to secure a trading deal with the village. It had only taken them a day to reach the border between Hai no Kuni and Nami, so they sent Yakumo and Ino into the village to see if they could find any information about Gato's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kakashi worked out a rough plan of attack, with Zabuza contributing any information he knew about the guy. Haku was happy to use Naruto as a pillow to rest because she was not used to traveling at such high speeds for such long stretches of time, but they always adopted the run fast and hide somewhere strategy. When they saw Haku, they felt compelled to say something, but since they were in enemy territory and on a mission, they were unable to do so, so they gave the girl the stink eye instead. Yakumo and Ino shunshin into the clearing, looking pretty pleased with themselves. After looking up from the scroll they had been using to rehearse their strategy, Kakashi said, "Report. I discovered that Gato uses 2 distinct sets of mercs. For hire. His larger group resides in a nearby compound. He also keeps the slaves and such there as well." When Ino reached the part about slaves, she obviously had to suppress her rage because she was aware of the world they lived in and how women like her were perceived, but that didn't make it any better and only made her more irate. Yakumo went on with her piece. Gato himself is holed up on a small island not too far from the mainland, and everyone in attendance nodded in agreement and understood what needed to be done. He also resides on that compound with the smaller group of mercs he uses as bodyguards. Before deciding on their plans, Kakashi and Naruto continued their conversation. This is how it will proceed. Gado's personal compound will be taken first by Haku, Yakumo, and me. Here on the mainland, Kakashi, Zabuza, and Ino will occupy the larger compound. Your group will discuss specifics, but let me say this. My group will arrive at the island compound first, and I will signal for the three of you to start your portion when we believe we are almost done. Do you understand? For the mission, Naruto's team gave him a chorus of, "Hi. Remember to flare your chakra twice in quick succession if you find yourself in need of assistance. Use the seal I gave each of you to communicate with me if you are unable to do that." He spoke once more, receiving a chorus of, "Hi. Keep in mind that these are the Earth's scum. Did you understand that none of them survived? They may not like it, but they could not allow them to live so that they could keep hurting other people." This time, all he received were solemn nods and one savage smile. After that, both groups disappeared from the clearing, leaving no evidence of their initial presence. By the time the groups were set up and prepared to perform the task for which they had been trained since childhood, night had spread its starry cloak over the world. As though the gods were favoring the team, the moon's light seemed to be fainter tonight than it had ever been. In order to resemble his former sensei, Naruto had put on his cloak, zipped it up, and put on the hood. His katana's sheath was stored in a storage seal that he wore, and the blade itself gleamed in the low light. Although she doubted it, Yakumo kept her paints ready in case she needed them. When she faced strong nin and these were merely hired grunts, she only needed the paints to increase the strength of her genjutsu. Haku was wearing an all-black battle kimono with mesh covering any exposed body parts, and she had put on her oinen, hunter.nin, mask. He turned to Yakumo and said, "Remember, hit as many guards as you can as stealthily as possible. If you get caught and have to use jutsu, then do so, but only if necessary. The less chakra we waste here the better. Me and Haku will take Gado himself." He was met with a simple nod. Naturally, Yakumo had killed before, but it still troubled her deeply, and she was using the time to mentally get ready for the massacre she was about to carry out. When the moon's light finally peeked through the clearing, it revealed nothing. The merc said, "Hey Dan, you and the others up for card ga. Da. Gurgle." Before he passed away, having been pierced by one of Haku's senbon. Because Naruto's blade had freed his head from his shoulders, his friend Dan had perished. As Haku killed, Naruto saw her twitch and merely put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She nodded to him as she calmed down, and they immediately started to jump through the night's shadows in the direction of Gado. There were corpses all over the floors behind Yakumo as she walked slowly through the compound like a ghost without making any noise. Before they could even make a sound, anyone who saw her was killed. Because of her genjutsu, some were lucky enough to pass away without even noticing her. As she proceeded on her walk of death, her long brown hair fell in waves over her face and blood trickled from her hands. The tattooed merc could only utter, "Hey, you can't," before Yakumo used her kunai to cut his throat open, spilling his blood on the floor and leaving another corpse for the island's creatures to consume. To his overnight companion, a wannabe samurai muttered, "Man, this midget pays some good money and all, but he is way too fucking paranoid. Shit kinda gets irritating." "Quiet out there," shouted Gato, the plump mouse. None of them were aware that a 12-year-old genin was currently slaughtering their members in the lower levels. Furthermore, none of them were aware that the only people still residing on the upper floors were Gato and these two unfortunate guards. If either of the two guards had looked just outside the door to the hallway they were in, they would have seen bodies nailed to the walls by senbon of ice, heads lying far from where their bodies were, and the building's walls and floors stained with their comrades' bodily fluids. When the samurai's friend turned to respond, she saw that the man's body was in the hands of an oinen who was holding the man by the neck with senbon between her knuckles. When he turned to open the door, Naruto's blade sliced him in half down the middle. The teenager in the cloak wiped the blood from his blade and nodded to Haku before opening the enormous doors to Gato's office. They discovered the man working on some kind of paperwork behind his desk. They awaited the short man's attention. "Who the hell are you? I know for sure you're not on my payroll," he asked, looking up. When he got no response, he snorted, "I guess you're here to look for a job then. Talk to Hiro outside about it." When he didn't hear back, he got up and yelled, "What the fuck do you two want?" When he finally got a response, the two turned to face the door, and Gato grinned, thinking he had reached them, only to be met with a view that nearly made him throw up. The bodies of his men littered the room outside and his corridor. He simply stared wide-eyed at the slaughter, too shocked to even speak. Then he saw what he believed to be a ghost. Rather, he noticed that it was just a young girl. If he hadn't noticed that her hands were covered in blood, he would have returned. Gato almost shat himself when the brunette turned to face the other two and muttered, "Lower floors are is his entire compound dead? Gato smiled and started laughing to himself. The three turned their focus back to the pitiful human excuse. Two missing nin suddenly appeared from the rafters, shouting, Sweden! Sweden no jutsu! Water release! Water bullet! Calling out, Futon! Daitopa no jutsu! Wind release! Great breakthrough! Naruto took a small step forward and slashed his sword horizontally, unleashing a wave of wind that easily defeated the two Sweden jutsus. One of the two rogue Kiri.nin was hit with multiple water senbons through the neck, and the other was struck with a kunai through the skull before he could counter. Gato tried to think of any possible escape route as he watched his men being killed so easily, but he was at a loss for ideas. He didn't realize until it was too late that these three had killed every person in his compound. So, in an attempt to save his pitiful life, he turned to the only strategy he could think of: begging. The man groveled to the three, even getting down on his knees, and said, What do you want? Money? Land? Women? I'll give you anything you want, just let me live. Naruto approached him and dropped a scroll to the floor. Naruto said in a monotone, Any and all safe codes, bank numbers, and the location of anything else with value. The man started writing everything down while scrawling, especially when he felt a cold steel blade at his throat. Yes, of course, he said, returning the scroll to Naruto, who then gave it to Yakumo. They nodded and left after saying, You and Haku go and gather as much as you can. I can go, right? You said you'd let me live? Gato said, giving the man a look. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? Naruto's only answer was to turn to face the man and mutter, You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? Kudos to anyone who can see where this is coming from. Then, with a flick of the wrist, Gato's head flew across the room. After raiding every single vault that Gato had listed, the three met on a hill far from the enormous compound and sealed all the various jewels, scrolls, and cash they could fit into. A Kage Bunshin, shadow clone, materialized to his right with a single thought. After going through a series of hand seals, the real Naruto yelled, Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. Fire release. Great Dragon Fire, while his clone yelled, Futon. Daitopa no Jutsu. The real Naruto then released a fire in the shape of a dragon's head the size of a small house. Shortly after, the flames ignited the entire compound. After a minute of watching it burn, the three disappeared, making their way to the larger compound on the main island. The other three had launched their own attack in response to the enormous fire. When Kakashi, Ino, and Zabuza noticed the fire and sensed the chakra spike, they got ready for their portion of the mission. With all the mercs watching, they leapt into the center of the compound after saying, Ino, remember, you go and free any and all captives. Me and Zabuza will take care of the rest. Kakashi and Zabuza finished the seals for their methods before the paid soldiers could even say something foolish. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu, water release, water dragon bullet. Zabuza yelled, bringing forth a huge water dragon that rushed toward a group of mercenaries with a watery growl. Raiden. Raryuden, lightning release. Lightning dragon bullet. Is Kakashi's way of calling out his own elemental dragon. The fortunate ones were those struck by either of the two methods. Their comrades would not be as fortunate as they were. Their deaths were swift and final. Both strong ninjas nodded to one another before taking off in quick succession, Zabuza brandishing his enormous Zanbatsu and Kakashi holding his trademark Reikiri. With his electrified hand, Kakashi sliced through merc after merc. If it weren't for the heat of the procedure instantly cauterizing any and all wounds it caused, there would have been a lot more blood spray. Naturally, this was the main source of harm and suffering. If enough of the victim's body was still attached, they would live long enough to experience the pain of their body gradually begin shutting down rather than rapidly bleeding out to death. Zabuza was making his way through his portion of the compound in a much bloodier fashion. His sword was so large that it could take out 3 men at once with a single sweep. Feeling the blood of his victims wash over him, he smiled, flashing his sharp teeth. He didn't care that some of the men he struck weren't entirely dead. Instead, they were left to live out the final moments of their lives, watching in horror as their severed limbs twitched with the last remaining nerve impulses, resembling a sick real-life zombie. Though equally gory, Ino's approach was much more subdued. Anyone unfortunate enough to come into contact with her would suffer a slow, excruciating death from whatever poison was on that specific kunai or senbon. Others suffocated as their lungs shut down and stopped pumping air. Others felt the electric shocks running through their bodies shut down all of their organs, and still others felt acid burn their way through their veins until nothing remained of them. She had no regrets about these men. According to her, they were the filth of the world and deserved worse for the mistreatment they had inflicted on the people they had taken prisoner. When she eventually arrived at the enormous tent that had held the aforementioned prisoners, a senbon containing a poison she had created was given to the guards who were staring at her with lust. Shini no Seppan, or the kiss of death is what she called it. The victim would literally have blood pouring out of every hole in their head as all of the blood in their body flowed upward and filled their heads. You can probably guess where I got this from. It's a midpoint 2000s kung fu film. She expected to see prisoners in cages or something when she entered the tent, but instead she saw her cloaked crush removing the last of the chains from the inmates. All he said in response to her inquisitive look was, "Cage Bunshin." She simply nodded. Naruto is the only one who can attempt to save everyone. Boss wants you to take them and meet up with Yakumo and Haku outside in the forest. Once you're all together, take them back to the village. Boss said that he, Zabuza, and Kakashi will take care of this place. It makes sense. Without having to worry about chakra fatigue, those three are capable of using some pretty devastating jutsu. Haku, Yakumo, and I are designed for smaller scale tasks. Those three are capable of both that and larger scale combat. Keeping that in mind, she silenced the inmates, led them out of the tent, and led the small group of inmates with her to the forest. Curious, the Naruto clone glanced at the redhead who had stayed with him. She was covered in blood, mud, and other filth, but in other situations, he was certain she was a bombshell in his tenants' league. She appeared to have been starved for a long time, and her hair was disheveled and knotted. Fortunately, it appeared that she had prevented them from doing to her what they had done to the other women. He poofed away before she could speak to her cloaked savior, and then the same figure passed through the tent's flaps. She gave him a bow and said, "Thank you for saving me. Any longer and I would have been victim to a fate much worse than death. I owe you my life." He waved his hand dismissively, asking, "Why stay here? I doubt it was to thank me. I am actually a kunoichi and I want to exact some revenge on these scumbags. Normally I would be able to do so myself, but they have been drugging me for the past month and so I can only do some lower level jutsu," was her response. Naruto gave that a nod. He wasn't exactly in favor of unwarranted retaliation or resentment, but that was another story. They had already beaten and starved this poor woman just a day or so after raping her. Her desire for vengeance was understandable to him. He grabbed a pouch of kunai from inside his cloak and threw it at her. "Though I have no doubt of your claim at being powerful at this moment, you are not, and me and my comrades wish to wipe this place off the map, so please stay close to me, miss." "Alright. My name is Mei Terumi of Kiri." He nodded to her and walked away, the redhead trailing behind. The two were rushed by a random merc who believed he could defeat them, only to be struck in the skull by a kunai. Naruto cast a sidelong glance in her direction. The two went on, with Mei occasionally hurling kunai and Naruto using swift jutsu or sword swipes to eliminate others. Mei was shocked to learn who Naruto's allies were when they arrived in the middle of the compound. Zabuza Momoichi and Sharingan no Kakashi. Who is this guy to have such powerful allies? After giving Naruto a quick glance, Kakashi and Zabuza leapt to his side. The insane Kirin grunted, "So who's the redhead?" The angry redhead said, "My name is Mei Terumi, Zabuza." The blood-soaked man laughed and said, "Woe of the Terumi clan. Damn Gaki, you sure have a knack for picking up some powerful allies, huh?" After observing their nods, he said, "Yeah, you could say that. You guys done? Okay, let's finish this then." The three of them disappeared to a nearby hilltop after Naruto grabbed Mei in the bridal style. After passing through a series of seals and accumulating a tremendous amount of chakra, Naruto yelled, "Ranten! Gakido no Susanoo!" Storm release. Wrath of the Storm God, roughly, and sent out powerful winds from his right palm while firing what appeared to be real thunderbolts from his other. Everything in the compound was crushed and flattened by the winds using as much chakra as he had put into the technique, and the lightning bolts burned everything that remained to a crisp. Ultimately, all that remained was a burned dot out clearing the size of a small town. Mei could only marvel at how much damage this one man had done with just one method. Furthermore, he didn't even appear to be winded by it. When a whistle blew, the four turned to see Haku, Yakumo, and Ino also gazing at the devastation. As a group, they turned to look at what had once been a place where disgusting and vile people were doing even worse things. Naruto picked up the Terumi again, not wanting to stay much longer, and they left the rest for nature to take care of. A roar of cheering and applause greeted the group as they returned to the village. What these people had done for the captives appeared to have been communicated to the rest of the village. Naruto and his companions grinned because this was the motivation behind their actions. A young child dashed up to Naruto's leg. Glancing down at the girl, who could only be 4 years old, he grinned. To indicate that she wanted to be picked up, she extended her arms. The parents of the girls ran up to him attempting to apologize for the girl's behavior only to gasp as he picked her up only for the girl to yank on his hood pulling it off. They expected to be greeted by the face of a scarred man well into his years, and even Mei was expecting this, but instead the hood had hidden the face of golden-haired teen with regal features and the brightest blue eyes anyone had ever seen. At this precise moment, Naruto gained a following almost immediately. Instead of getting mad, he merely chuckled and placed the girl on his shoulders, much to the little girl's delight. Thoughts of how good a father he was going to be echoed through the heads of almost every girl there, and Mei found herself debating on seducing this boy. No man in front of her. Strong beyond his years, crafty, attractive, and excellent with children. My future husband might be right here. Looking at herself, though she sweat dropped. Should probably get cleaned up before I try and seduce him though. An old man wearing a hard hat and with a noticeable beer gut walked up to the group and bowed to them. With the girl still on his shoulders, Naruto approached him and took out a sealing scroll from his coat. I speak not only for my family but for all the people of this village when I thank you for rescuing our fellow civilians. A stack of files and several large sacks were called out as he placed it on the ground and pushed a small amount of chakra into it. The sacks are filled to the brim with jewels, gems, and other assorted valuables. The files are several deeds of land as well as business ownership titles that we liberated from Gato. I return them to you in the village. Everyone in the room was crying. Screams of delight and another round of thunderous applause greeted Team 7+2. How can we ever repay you? The man asked, looking up at the teenager with teary eyes. We've taken a cut of the valuables as payment for the mission. The only other thing you can do is once you are back on your feet to seek out a trade agreement with Konoha. Spoke the lazy Junin with one eye. Of course. It's the least we can do, the old drunk said frantically as he turned to face the silver-haired man. Naruto said calmly, then we'll be off now. Gotta get back to our village after all. Mei grabbed onto Naruto's back as they started to leave, and when he felt her rather large assets pressing against his back, he nearly fainted from a nosebleed. Kakashi and Zabuza laughed at this turn of events, and the girls palmed their faces. The Kyuubi yelled, hey, what the hell? You like her boobs but not mine, mine are just as big as hers, and he saw her pouting and pushing her breasts up with her arms. I don't have time for that, damn you. After traveling slightly over half the way to Konoha, the group made the decision to finally take a break. They had been working non-stop since the previous evening, so it had been a long day. Their bodies eventually needed to rest, but it helped them forget about what they had done. The group decided it was the ideal location after discovering a clearing close to one of the numerous waterfalls strewn throughout High no Kuni's forests. While the guys set up camp, the girls, including Mei, went to the waterfall to clean themselves of dirt and grime. Naturally, Naruto was becoming very agitated because every time Zabuza or Kakashi looked at him, they would start laughing uncontrollably. After the 50th time, it was starting to irritate his last nerve, even though it had been fine the first 2 times. His jaw dropped as he turned to threaten the two with his blade, only to discover that the girls had returned from their fictitious bath at that precise moment. Of course, he had witnessed Ino and Yakumo nearly nude on a number of occasions, but it didn't bother him as much even though he wasn't desensitized to it. Mei was the cause of his reaction, not Haku, who had a few years on the two but was much more modest in terms of attire. He had been correct to believe that she was attractive after being cleaned, but he had been in battle mode at the time, so all the hurry and violence had forgotten that small detail. But now he was able to fully enjoy the view of Mei Terumi. Her long, flowing red hair, which was now free of knots and other issues, gleamed in the waning light. It covered one of her aqua green eyes and extended well past her pert bottom, giving her an alluring, come hither, appearance. He could only see makeup ruining such a face because the woman didn't wear any makeup, exposing her perfect porcelain skin. What she was wearing, or not wearing, was the other striking detail. She showcased her full curves with what little rags remained of her clothing in a way that left just enough room for the imagination to entice others to want more. Since she had only been a prisoner for a few hours, she couldn't really be held responsible because there wasn't much she could do. To make sure Naruto's gaze was solely on her, the woman strolled up to him. At the expense of Naruto's pride, Kakashi and Zabuza were off to the side, dying of laughter. The girls knew the woman was strong, likely on par with Kakashi, and all they could do was fume in jealousy. Another redhead was muttering various curses and coming up with ways to get rid of the water slut inside Naruto as they competed for his affections. When Mei finally got to Naruto, she put her hands over the blonde's shoulders and said, "See something you like?" in the sexiest voice she could manage. Which, believe it or not, was sexy, and the Jinchuriki had to use all of his willpower to keep his mouth shut and avoid looking foolish. Rather, Naruto simply swallowed and gave a small nod. I'm glad that my very handsome savior likes what he sees, she continued, tracing the line of Naruto's jaw with a delicate finger. I still have yet to repay you for that, don't I? Naruto managed to gather his remaining dignity and mutter, it was no problem. Just what I do. She leaned her head to literally breathe the next word into his ear. Anything. A stray thought in the back of his mind asked whether he should help Zabuza and Kakashi, who appeared to be on the verge of death from a lack of oxygen. Well, regardless of that, I still owe you quite literally my life. So my dear savior, what is it you want? I'll give you, she said. The younger girls had had enough of the red-headed slut hitting on my man, and took action before he could make an even bigger fool of himself. Specifically, Haku threw Senbon at specific nerve clusters to knock the redhead unconscious. By pushing Mei aside, Naruto, being Naruto, tried to save her. The result of these actions was our lucky bastard of a protagonist with a set of very pert, soft, and bare D-cups pressed to his cloaked chest, the one-eyed wonder and his eyebrowless partner unconscious from a nosebleed, and the girls even more envious. These girls are either going to make me the happiest man on earth or send me to an early grave, was his final thought before he embraced the darkness that was unconsciousness. I'm not sure which I like better. When Naruto woke up, his head was resting in the lap of the person who had caused his brief slumber. He collected his remaining willpower, removed his cloak, and offered it to the Kiri beauty before he could fall back into that nap again. What, you don't like what you see? She asked, pouting at him. If it was possible, she further accentuated her large assets by pushing them together. Trust me, Mei-san, I really like what I see, but I don't think entering Konoha with you like that will be the easiest of affairs, so if you would, was his direct response. At his remark, she grinned to herself, and so it started. Fine. But only if you don't call me Mei-san. Call me Mei-chan. She went on, pretending to sigh, and Naruto accepted his offered cloak. As she zipped it to conceal herself, Naruto perspired, thinking, I'm glad Sensei put seals on it so it could expand if need be, otherwise I'd never be able to wear it again. She squealed and hugged herself, saying, you know Naruto-kun, I might just keep this cloak of yours. It's just so cozy and warm. Naruto thought, crying anime tears, that cloak was a gift from Sensei too. I looked so fierce. Putting aside his childish thoughts, Naruto's eyes immediately became serious. Now I know Gato and his men have done some despicable things, but capturing Kunoichi? As far as I know, he was never that stupid, and Kiri is quite the travel from Nami. So how did you end up in his filthy hands? Mei's shoulders slumped and all emotion vanished from her face. All of the other members of Naruto's group had stopped making jokes and were standing by his side. Zabuza sneered and Haku looked away when he said, I'm sure you all know of the less than great state Kiri is in right now. After noticing their reactions, she let out another sigh and went on, well, I'm actually on a mission. Zabuza's Zanbatu was around her neck, waiting for her to explain why it was called the Kabikirbocho, decapitating carving knife. Nobody did anything to assist her. After a few minutes of tense silence, Naruto called in a firm voice, Zabuza, remove the blade. Zabuza was about to question him when he noticed the expression in the teenager's eyes. He only said, TCH, better not be a mistake, Gaki, before removing the blade from her throat. Mei let out a sigh of relief before realizing that only Zabuza, Haku, and herself appeared to be doubting his choice. She would have allowed Zabuza to do what he was known for in his role. Her eyes widened as the blonde container said, people in my family have been known to show some empath powers. Due to certain circumstances beyond my control, that sense was amplified and I can now tell exactly how people around me feel. He was a human lie detector. He could almost read her thoughts, so he knew to trust her. Gaki, is there no end to your surprises? Zabuza simply laughed. Naruto laughed and retorted, remember who my parents are, just like I said. Hey yay, who are your parents? I mean, to have a kid like you, they got to have been really powerful themselves, and the only blondes to come from Konoha are Yamanakas, and unless Blondie over there is into incest, that, no way. Mei's jaw dropped when she realized who her father had been. Naruto grinned. Haha, yup, dear old daddy was the Yondaime Hokage, he said. This man is ideal. It makes sense why he is so strong, since he was able to walk. He has most likely been trained by individuals like Kakashi and the Sandaime Hokage himself. He's also the container for the Kyuubi, if I'm not mistaken. But who was his mother? Naruto clarified, my mother. My mother was Kushina Uzumaki. Mei's jaw dropped to the ground once more as he said, Kushina Uzumaki. Whoa, his mother was the last of the Uzumaki family, jackpot. Now that you don't need to be worried about being decapitated, would you continue with your story? Kakashi sighed. Huh, oh right. Well, I was on a mission but not for the Mizukage. I'm actually the leader of the rebel faction in Kiri and I went on a diplomatic mission hoping that Konoha would aid us in our cause. Mei looked down. She heard Naruto scoff and looked up. I turned away because the Sandaime did not want to involve his village, she said. He got mixed reactions when he said, not surprised. Up until about a month ago the man sitting behind that chair was just the shell of a once feared cage. She became upset with him because she thought he was mocking her for being dumb. Ino and Yakumo shook their heads, Kakashi grimaced and turned away, and Mei was taken aback that a strong nin would disparage his own cage. He continued by saying, it's a long story better saved for when we're in Konoha, but I will say this, if you were to come with us and ask him now he would definitely say yes. Like I told these two, I got some major pull with the old monkey. Mei's eyes widened when she realized that, in just a few hours, this one man had saved her from a fate worse than death and was now going to assist her in saving her village. She lowered her head and covered her face with her hair. She jumped directly at Naruto and started sobbing into his chest before anyone could question her. Naruto's expression fell, and he embraced her, allowing her to let out all of her suppressed feelings. Haku sympathized with the woman because he understood what it was like to have a Kekkei Genkai and live in Kiri. No one there could hold the redhead responsible for her reaction, especially when you consider the pressure to uphold a particular image as the leader of the rebels and the possibility of a terrible outcome. Since she was only human and could only handle so much, this man was basically relieving her of a significant amount of her stress, not out of lust or greed, but because he believed it was the right thing to do. As he and his group stared at the enormous gates of Konohagakure no Sato after being gone for just over a month, the blonde Uzumaki asked, damn, it feels like we've been gone for a year or something, nay. Excited to see their families again and return home, Ino and Yakumo grinned. Haku and Zabuza smiled as this was going to be their new home, a safe place where they wouldn't have to watch their backs 24/7. Kakashi continued to read his little book, but you could see a grin on his masked face at finally being home too. Naruto? He had missed one thing only, his ramen. With that in mind he led his merry band of misfits with smiles on their faces to the gates of the place they called home. Hey, isn't that? Haha, yup, I'd recognize that blonde hair anywhere, spoke a chuckling Izumo. With smiles on their faces Izumo and Katetsu greeted Team 7, only to grow shocked at Naruto with two more very attractive ladies hanging off of him. At that they just chuckled and shook their heads, only Naruto would leave to train and come back with two hotties. However, they grew nervous as they laid eyes upon the massive imposing figure that was a grinning Zabuza Momoichi. Shaking in their sandals they looked to Kakashi for answers. Still reading his little orange book, the pervert lazily said, he's with us. Gonna be joining Konoha as a nin, all thanks to our favorite blondie over there. The two Eternal Gate guards just shakily nodded their heads and let the group through the gates. As soon as Naruto saw the inside of the village he attempted to speed off to his own personal slice of heaven, only to have Kakashi grab him by his collar. Now Naruto, you gotta talk to the Hokage about these three like you said you were, and you don't go back on your word, do you? The blonde just childishly pouted and huffed at having his nindo used against him in such a way. With that, Naruto and Kakashi sunshined the group to the Hokage's reception area. The receptionist looked up at the sound of a shunshin being performed only to face palm at the nervously grinning Uzumaki and his massive group, and with the other hand pointed towards the Hokage's doors giving permission to go in. As Naruto opened the doors to the Sandaime's office he was greeted by said man smiling, which he only returned with a bow. The Sandaime's smile noticeably dropped, but he still smiled as the rest of Team 7 filed in. Said smile turned into a very confused look as they were followed by an A-rank missing nin, who he assumed was said nin's apprentice, and a very busty redhead he swore he recognized from somewhere. I'm glad that you're back, Team 7, but may I ask why the Kirigakure no Kijin, demon of the hidden mist, is in my office? Asked a casual Hokage. He was aware of his advanced age and Zabuza's strength, but this was his territory, and despite his advanced age, he was self-assured enough to give Zabuza and even his apprentice a hard time. Kakashi gestured idly at Naruto with his thumb. Hiruzen simply wiped his face with his hands. Naruto was obviously involved in this. I would assume that he was gradually attempting to kill me by increasing my blood pressure if I didn't know any better. Genin Naru. Whoa, hold on, exclaimed Mei, whose face was reflected by Zabuza and Haku. He's a genin, she went on, pointing to Naruto. Actually, we're all genin. Graduated almost 2 months ago. Ino and Yakumo beamingly appeared. After nearly a minute of silence in the office, Zabuza started laughing and eventually rolled on the floor while clutching his sides. The Hokage and Team 7 believed that he had lost what little sanity he still possessed. Gaki, what the fuck? He said, slamming a hand on Naruto's shoulder after finally controlling his breathing and wiping a tear from his eyes. He then resumed laughing. What the hell, old man? If that's how strong your genin are, my cause would only need like 4 junin and we could wrap up the civil war in no time, Mei said, pointing an accusing finger at Hiruzen. Hiruzen showed them he meant business by releasing a tiny quantity of his chakra. Now if you would have asked, you would know that this team is not average, far from it. Naruto here has been training since he was 8. The Hokage bowed his head in embarrassment, and Kakashi turned away when Mei said, "Yay, I kinda figured being who his parents were and all. I mean, you probably had a hand in his training, right?" Mei was taken aback by Naruto's decision to speak up at this point, saying, "No, they did not. Only 2 people are responsible for my current strength, and they are my old sensei Vincent and myself. He developed this strength almost entirely on his own. Unbelievable." "Wait, what about those 2? She asked, gesturing to the team's 7 girls. They pointed at Naruto in return. Ino said, "If it wasn't for him, I'd still be some stupid and pathetic fangirl focused more on her looks and dieting than being an actual kunoichi. If I hadn't met him, I wouldn't be here. My mind would have been locked away inside my body, leaving a demon to take over and try to destroy Konoha," Yakumo said, stepping forward and covering her mouth with her long sleeves as she usually does. "Yes, I absolutely must have him now. He trained himself to be very close to cage level, then he saved these girls and made them stronger than the majority of B-rank nin. My apologies for jumping to conclusions." Putting aside her filthy thoughts, Mei bowed to Hiruzen and then Naruto. Sarutobi and Naruto waved her away, unconcerned that she had mentioned a sore spot in the Hokage. "As I was saying, Genin Naruto, why did you bring an A-rank missing nin, his apprentice, and a wanted woman into my office?" "Hokage Sama, I think that adding a former member of the Kirigakure no Shinobigatana Shichinen Shu would be a great boon to our forces, as well as offering a wealth of knowledge of some more underground things. Adding his apprentice who herself is at least low Junin in strength and posses the Yuki clans Hyde and Kekai Genkai to our numbers at the same time would just give us even more strength." As he considered it all, Sarutobi rubbed his beard. In the village's eyes, it was a win-win situation, and since a well-known Junin and the names of one of the royal clans supported the 2, their integration would be nearly smooth. Since the young Yuki heiress had never identified with a village in the first place, she would not be a problem. Zabuza, however, would be problematic. Because it was so difficult to come to even the smallest of agreements in the first place. The villages had no laws against taking in other villages missing nin, but it was still a sensitive subject. However, there would be virtually no backlash to deal with because Kiri is too preoccupied with their ongoing civil war. In light of that, he started searching for 2 files on his desk. This document here states that you are willingly becoming a citizen of Konoha and that you will abide by any and all of its laws. As for your joining the Ninja Corps, we will deal with that in 3 days, so be prepared for that. All you have to do is sign your name here." He found them and offered one to Haku, who smiled broadly on her porcelain face. The Hokage then put his seal on it and put it aside for filing at a later time. He handed the document to Zabuza. "Your situation is a bit more complicated. There are no laws against you joining us, but there will still be some weariness. As such, you must sign this paper submitting yourself to 2 mental evaluations, a physical, as well as being followed by a team of Anbu for a month. At the end of the month your probationary period will be up, and if you have met our standards then you will be tested to see where you stand in our village's ranks." Zabuza turned to face his adoptive daughter, who was grinning, and the Gaki who had put him in this predicament. "I got nothing to lose and a lot to gain, so fuck it," he shrugged and signed the document. He turned to face Mei and folded his hands together, saying, "Now, let's address your predicament. You previously came here to ask for help, but I turned you down. Now you're back. Why do you think I'll change my mind?" Mei lowered her head in despair at that point, believing it was all for nothing, but she felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to see a pair of bright blue eyes that were full of resolve and confidence. Naruto asked, glancing at the cage, "May I make her argument?" Hiruzen waved his hand and said, "You may."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.